Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Matthew Coller here, and we are just a couple of days away from the Super Bowl. The show, of course, as always, presented by FanDuel. We'll have a FanDuel question of the day, one more before the big game, but this is a pretty wide open show here on a Friday night for you guys to jump in with questions, comments, thoughts, feelings, and reactions to whatever it is that you want to talk about. But the last 7 days have certainly provided us with a lot to discuss. So I want to begin that conversation with an article from Kevin Seifert of ESPN breaking down the biggest questions following the firing of Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and the notable quotes that came from Kevin Seifert's article. And that starts with a shocker, right? The quarterback situation. And I was curious when I saw Kevin's article pop up, like, how is he going to frame the quarterback situation now that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah has been fired? Like, I mean, is it even really different than we thought it was going to be if Kwesi was still here? I mean, I think we all agreed that at very least they were going to be looking for competition for JJ McCarthy. But what Kevin wrote was slightly more far on the meter. Remember, we talked about the meter the other night, where if you're in the red, it's you have to find a starting quarterback. If you're solidly in the yellow or the orange on JJ McCarthy, then you're probably thinking competition, but maybe there's still a chance for him to win a competition. And then if you are in, I guess it'd be the red. Wait, how does this work again? No, it's the blue. I'm sorry. The blue goes first. That's you're finding another starting quarterback. Then it is the yellow where you're looking for competition. Maybe you're not totally sold. You need a real starter. If you're in the orange, then you're talking about for JJ McCarthy to get more of a shot than not. And if you're in the red, then you're all in on JJ McCarthy. Well, here's what Seifert wrote in his piece. He said, quote, "The best way to put this based on what sources have said is that all bets are off. The general manager who drafted McCarthy number 10 in 2024 has been fired, and the coach who is in full agreement with that decision is now under considerably more scrutiny." So all bets are off. Like, how do we take that when someone says to you, when it comes to JJ McCarthy and the quarterback situation, folks, all bets are off? Do you take that as in, like, that means he's toast, that he's not going to be a part of this? I don't take it quite like that. I think what it means is there's no real guarantees here at all, just on this entire situation. There's no guarantees that he's going to even get a shot to continue to compete for the starting quarterback position. But I mean, I think it also means that it's not impossible that he would be able to still be a part of this. But I wasn't sure exactly, and I'm not asking it rhetorically. I mean, I really mean I'm not sure exactly how to evaluate that sentence. Like, all bets are off. What does that really mean? I think it means that anything could happen. That if the Vikings went out and made a big trade for a quarterback that you never saw coming, somebody I thought of today, and I don't think this is possible or anything like that. So it's certainly doesn't even fall into the rumor category. But with Jeff Stoutland retiring from or leaving the Philadelphia Eagles, and there was some reports that Landon Dickerson might consider retiring, which would be crazy and bizarre. And AJ Brown wanting out. It's like Jalen Hurts. Like, I was trying to come up with what is outside the box. Is there anyone that I haven't thought of yet that would totally shock me? And I would be like, what? That person was in the discussion all along? And no, I don't think that that's realistic. But I mean, some of you brought up CJ Stroud and the Houston Texans after, the way that the season ended for Houston and his arm talent and what he might be able to do in this system. I mean, all bets are off, I think, just means exactly what Kevin Garnett said following his NBA championship, which was anything is possible now at the quarterback position. And something that we've talked about a lot on the show was just about what is the power structure now? What is the situation with having Kevin O'Connell basically running the offseason along with Brian Flores and Rob Brzezinski in charge as the acting general manager? Like, does this mean that essentially Kevin O'Connell can run amok and do whatever he wants? Well, Seifert says no, not exactly. What Seifert wrote on Rob Brzezinski's role was Brzezinski has too much stature in the organization to be a simple conduit for the impulses of O'Connell or defensive coordinator Brian Flores or any other member of the organization. I think this makes a lot of sense. I do feel like O'Connell, Brzezinski, and Flores are going to be a lot on the same page, because when you talk about building a consensus, as Mark Wilf did, well, I mean, the main voices here for getting what they want and what they need are O'Connell and Brian Flores. But I would take this as if, say, just for example, Kevin O'Connell wants to send 2 first-round draft picks for the top center he can get or something. Rob Brzezinski's not going to say, come on, man. Or he's going to say, come on, man, we can't do stuff like that. Or he wants to give out a huge contract to some player that's not that great just because, hey, we need him and we need to win that, contract debate or whatever it might be like that Brzezinski is going to say, hang on. And this is true, because I was thinking, look, if there's, 2026 is your kind of big final showdown type of year for Kevin O'Connell, then you have to do everything and anything short-sightedly. And I still think that is the case. And I think it would have been the case with Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, but I don't think that it's just because, hey, everyone is on a hot seat in the NFL basically these days, right? Or that, 2026 is this final year, for O'Connell to prove X, Y, and Z. It's also because when you look around the roster, this was always built to kind of be like the big year for this team. It was supposed to be 2025, 2026. And I remember Jeremy Fowler saying last year that they kind of viewed it as a 3-year window. And I looked at it and went, isn't it more of a 2-year type of window? Unless, of course, JJ McCarthy had been phenomenal, which he still could be eventually. But were he to be excellent, then they might be able to stretch that out to a 3rd year. But when you look at the ages of the players and you look at the contracts, it really kind of all leads down to this. So it's not just that, Brzezinski would be like, I'm helpless to say no to Kevin O'Connell. Of course not. He's been in the organization for a long time. He has the cachet. He has the trust of the ownership to be able to say, no, I don't think we can do this. This isn't a good idea, whatever it might be, those short-sighted type of moves. But at the same time, short-sighted type of moves kind of make a lot of sense when it comes to a situation such as this one. So, I tend to look at it like it makes all the sense in the world to have the setup be like that, where they're trying to do as much this offseason as they can with the current roster to win right now, regardless of who the quarterback is, which is usually not how it works. It usually doesn't work that you're trying to stack up a roster as much as possible and then not be sure who your quarterback is. You're normally trying to get those things to cross. But if McCarthy doesn't win the job and doesn't, look phenomenal in training camp and take huge steps forward, or if he even gets a chance to do those things, well, then that's going to have to be what it is for the Vikings. And in Vikings history, there are plenty of examples, and Rob Brzezinski knows this as well as anybody, of stacked rosters and surprisingly good quarterbacks. And all of a sudden, you've got yourself a trip to the NFC Championship, whether that's going back to Randall Cunningham or Jeff George. I know Jeff George didn't make the NFC Championship, but he did win a playoff game and had a crazy shootout game against the greatest show on turf Rams. And, they came out on top. But Case Keenum going to the NFC Championship in 2017, Sam Darnold doing what he did in 2024. I mean, if you look at a lot of the quarterbacks that we talk about as available and possible for the Vikings, and then compare some of their histories to what Sam Darnold did before he got here. And I know it's a very different story because Sam Darnold had been on the rise starting really in 2022, where things started to turn for him. And then when he played in San Francisco, he won a competition there. He was good there. And then he gets to Minnesota and it's kind of a perfect storm. So you can't always look at a Geno Smith, a Kyler Murray, a Mac Jones, whoever it might be, and say, well, they'll just do the same thing because, there's different factors with every one of those guys. But it is sort of a proof of concept of, well, if that's what their idea is, to try to Sam Darnold something, a situation where they have the strongest roster possible and a cheap quarterback who's good enough, which Sam Darnold was and needs to be remembered that Darnold only got paid $10 million the year he was so good for the Vikings. Are they going to try to do that again? And I tend to think that they probably are, but Brzezinski's not going to allow O'Connell, Flores, etc. to do things that could very seriously damage the long term of the Minnesota Vikings. But I think in terms of trying to make the absolute best out of this roster, like where does that start and where does that end? Where does damaging long term start versus just taking advantage of the potential last year of something that you built for as roster builders since 2023? I mean, that's when this team's roster build really begins, is in 2023, when they allow Cook and Thielen and Tomlinson and, Kendricks and so forth. When those guys go, that begins your roster rebuild. And in the 2024 offseason, you go out and get those key players, those stars in free agency. And even though they haven't all worked out in 2025 free agency, there was still re-signing Byron Murphy. There was still Jonathan Allen's probably going to be on this roster more likely than not for next year. There's still signing Isaiah Rodgers, who's going to be here. So a lot of your roster build and the draft picks, Jordan Addison, Dallas Turner, and Donovan Jackson, those guys are a big part of this as well. So your roster build that you've put together for this long, trading for Jordan Mason, trading for TJ Hawkinson, it goes back years and extending Hawkinson. So why would you change the approach now where you've gotten to this point that you feel like you have a good roster? I mean, the only thing that would probably be where that starts and stops is the draft. That if you're Brzezinski, you certainly want this team to not be doing something like they did with Dallas Turner, where they moved up and gave up an incredible amount of draft capital for one player. I think you would not want to do that because what you're looking for on this roster as a whole is to find longer term pieces in the draft. But in free agency, I mean, could they go out and look for older players again? Yeah, absolutely. You bet they could. And one other thing I wanted to bring up just in regards to the Vikings, I know that this sort of made the rounds of Aaron Jones on Radio Row. He was on the Nightcap show and he said about Sam Darnold and letting him go, when you got a group of guys behind a quarterback and he wants to stay, I think you should try to make it work. He said that about not keeping Sam Darnold last year. So I don't know if Aaron Jones is going to be a Minnesota Viking next season. I suspect that that's probably not the case based on his contract. So I think that maybe he feels a little more like I could kind of just say what everybody already knows and already thinks, right? Which is that, hey, obviously you shouldn't have let Sam Darnold walk. I mean, we all know that. That's no kind of surprise to anyone since he's in the Super Bowl and you're watching from home. But the one line that he said there that did, spark a little bit of an eyebrow raise was wants to be there. So with Sam Darnold, because of the nature of Sam Darnold, because Darnold never says anything about any of his business doings, about anything from the past, and has never shown any sort of negativity toward the Vikings, the Jets, the Panthers, anybody else. you don't really know what went on for his own personal opinions and feelings because he's never said it out loud. And we have not ever heard him say, yeah, I wish I could have remained a Minnesota Viking, but he just said nothing to do with that. It was like, hey, that was my agent's thing, and I'm here now in Seattle, and I'm having a great time, right? But for Aaron Jones to say, maybe that's letting the cat out of the bag a little bit, that Sam Darnold wanted to continue to be a Minnesota Viking, that does make it a little bit interesting. But I also think that, and there was reports that they had offered Darnold a contract, which I do not doubt that they did, but why would you sign a multi-year contract when you're not sure what the team is doing with JJ McCarthy? And I was just watching last night this incredible documentary. I was up till like 2 a.m. watching the AMC San Francisco 49ers dynasty documentary. Of course, they play episode after episode after episode, and it started at like 11 at night, and I'm just watching one after the next. And I'm like, oh, it's really late now. But it's so compelling, so interesting. And they went through the 1988 quarterback controversy season with Steve Young and Joe Montana. And even though Young and Montana never had like a beef against each other, and they have always publicly said, I never hated him, he never hated me, we always were just kind of like both wanting to play and so forth. And I think it would have been that way with Sam Darnold and JJ McCarthy. But I also think that public pressure would have been very, very high if Sam Darnold had any bad games. And if you look at what happened with Seattle this year, there's some games in there where he didn't play his best. And if they went through the 2025 season with Darnold and JJ McCarthy is the backup, there would have been times, I am absolutely certain, where there would have been fans calling for, hey, it's time to put in JJ. You know, they just went 2 quarters in a row without scoring 3 touchdowns. It's time to put in JJ. Or if they had those injuries and they're kind of fighting for a playoff spot, what are we even doing here? We're stuck in the middle. Why aren't you just playing the younger guy? So sometimes it's not as simple as just, hey, if he had been here, it would have been the same. Seattle seemed very happy to have him really from day one. They, I think, liked Geno Smith, but maybe saw Geno Smith as having a ceiling and he wanted more money. So he left and, he ends up with the Raiders. But had he come back, Darnold would have known that that would have been the response. And had the Vikings, just think about like what they would have had to do to really fully commit to Darnold last year. They would have had to trade JJ McCarthy. And if they traded JJ McCarthy after the entire fan base had fallen in love with him, I don't think it would have gone over very well. Now, I mean, we would have probably come around to, well, look, they must really not believe in him as their guy, and they must have some serious concerns, or they really believe in Darnold. But then there's the other part of that, which is if you send away JJ McCarthy and he becomes good and Darnold is limited with a ceiling, right? So all these things are kind of thrown into that pot. The only thing that sort of threads the needle is that franchise tag, to where if you ended up benching Sam Darnold because it wasn't going that great, I mean, you're out some money for sure, but you're also only on the hook for 1 year. He's still going to go. You'll still get your comp pick. Someone will sign him, even though it might not be the same level of deal if he had struggled. But I think that was a complicating factor right there, is that Seattle embraced him right away. Hey, this is our new quarterback. Geno never really got us anywhere anyway. Whereas in Minnesota, the golden boy, the franchise quarterback, all those things that had been built up around JJ McCarthy, I think would have impacted Sam's want to come back on any sort of contract other than the franchise tag. So I don't doubt that he wanted to return to his locker room, return to his teammates, return to this offense, return to US Bank Stadium, all those things. But where and how you make that work exactly other than the franchise tag, I have a lot of trouble seeing. But this is more telling because of the fact that someone's kind of out there saying it and not really defending their quarterback. And there's other quotes from Justin Jefferson where he talks about not having good quarterback play being the cause for his down season. And well, all of these things are true and you understand them. I went through everything I could find from Radio Row, Viking quotes, anything. Couldn't find any that said, hey guys, JJ McCarthy is our freaking quarterback. And you guys, in the media, you don't know what you're talking about. I saw none of that. It was basically Jefferson saying, yeah, I had bad quarterback play, but I'm still awesome. And Aaron Jones saying, yeah, I wanted Sam Darnold back. I mean, that is pretty tough. And this is where I always get to the point in the discussion where I kind of just I end up feeling kind of bad for JJ McCarthy because he had this thrust upon him. He didn't put it on himself, and the expectations and all that stuff, like that was something that the team ended up, going with and doing. And I'm not saying it wasn't his fault. Like he needs to be better. He needs to be better prepared. He needs to run the offense better. He needs to everything, right? But that was a lot. And every time we talked about how much that was, it was sort of dismissed as like, yeah, but he'll be fine. And I was like, are you sure? That kept coming up for me was, yeah, okay. All right. I mean, I guess we'll see. And anytime that I know on, this show, most of the time where I would bring up these concerns, it would kind of be like, yeah, but he won the national championship. He's going to be fine. I was like, okay. And I thought after they decided to go with him that, okay, they must be right. Like they must be right about him because they would know better than me. They've seen what they've seen behind the scenes, but the reality of quarterbacking is you don't really know. You never really know. Whether it's Sam Darnold showing up and being great or JJ looking way less ready than we thought, you just never really, really know. Also, I wanted to mention that Seifert in his article said it would, quote, be wrong to put O'Connell on the so-called hot seat. Now, about that, I think everyone is. I just look around the NFL and go, who's not on the hot seat? Like, who is not 1 year away from being out of a job in the National Football League? Let's see. McVay. Anybody else? Any other nominations? I mean, you could say Kyle Shanahan, probably. They had another good year this year, but I mean, if they went 5-12 next year and Purdy got hurt and it looked like there was nowhere else to go, I suppose that it's possible. I would say him. I think, the two coaches in the Super Bowl are not on the hot seat in any way and could have a bad year next year and survive it. How many more though? Out of 32 coaches in the NFL, if Andy Reid misses the playoffs next year, Andy Reid's probably out, right? You could say Sean Payton has really complete control of that franchise. He's probably locked in for next year because of what he's done the last 2 years with Bo Nix. But even then, Sean Payton, if he becomes too powerful, too much of a bully, too whatever, and they win 6 games, it's not impossible. Out of 32, how many are just completely knighted? They are all set. They are untouchable. And it's less than 10 that you would guarantee because John Harbaugh is out and Mike Tomlin is out. And now that the guys who we would have guaranteed, even if we just go division by division, you could see Joe Brady being fired. Aaron Glenn is a dead man walking. I mean, who is why did I just blank? Jeff Hafley. Okay, Jeff Hafley. So maybe recently hired coaches, but even then we see that all the time where someone gets hired and then fired immediately. But I'll say Jeff Hafley, they'd probably give him more than 1 year. Todd Monken could go in a year. That happens all the time. Mike McCarthy could go in a year if they were really, really bad. Yeah, there's very few that you can get to that are locked in. So no, I wouldn't say O'Connell's on the hot seat as if they're talking right now about potentially firing him. But if the Vikings have a start to the season like they did last year and have a lot of the same results and struggle on offense and so forth, and things get toxic or whatever it might happen, leadership loses faith in him after 2 years. I mean, this stuff happens. And one thing that made me think of that is it is a relatively new thing for coaches to be hired and fired this quickly. I think one of the reasons is because the owners have more money than they used to. Owners have always been rich, but some of the owners used to make all of their money off the football team. And so they had less bazillions of dollars than when Walmart owns a team. So they would be a little bit more like, I don't want to pay a guy not to work. Like, let's let it ride. But going back to that documentary, Eddie DeBartolo, who was the mastermind behind Bill Walsh coaching the 49ers, those championship teams, he admitted to like firing and then kind of getting over it a bunch of times, Bill Walsh along the way, like a loss that made him upset, throwing a television in the locker room, smashing a Gatorade machine or whatever. Like, football has an effect on everybody, including owners. So yeah, not on the hot seat as in the hot seat where you assume that the person is on their way out like Aaron Glenn, but under a lot of pressure. That's what I would definitely say. Wanted to mention that as well. Couple other things to get to, and then we could talk about your questions and comments and our FanDuel question of the day. Former Minnesota Viking Roger Craig, legend, is in the Hall of Fame now. Of course, had a little bit to do with that San Francisco dynasty. That was maybe some of the stuff that was left meat on the bone in that thing, was that it was so focused on Walsh and Montana and Steve Young that I felt like they left out kind of some of the role players and how important they were. And Roger Craig being more than a role player, but a star. The thing about Roger Craig going in is that statistics don't always capture everything that Roger Craig did for that team, because, I mean, he did have 1,000, but because they had Jerry Rice and they had John Taylor and they had, Brent Jones and all these weapons, they didn't rely on one guy. And he didn't just, and they had Tom Rathman also, another running back / fullback. They didn't just rely on one guy in the backfield all the time, but he was a hugely successful player. When they gave him the ball, he could catch it. He was certainly a dynamic runner and showed it in that 1,000 season. So I've always thought that his role in that dynasty, he was there for such a long time, was underappreciated. He belonged in the Hall of Fame. Adam Vinatieri, South Dakota legend, into the Hall of Fame as well. Larry Fitzgerald. I hope you saw the video of Randy Moss welcoming Larry Fitzgerald to the Hall of Fame. That was super cool. Those guys have known each other since 98, since Fitzgerald was a ball boy, Minnesota guy, and really what you hope that Justin Jefferson is to the Minnesota Vikings, which is someone that stays with one franchise through thick and thin, and they'll get their shots at it if the team is competent, which Arizona isn't really, but they got a couple shots at it with Kurt Warner, that unbelievable run with Carson Palmer. So they had their tries with Larry Fitzgerald, but he stuck it out. He was an Arizona Cardinal for life, as much as everybody wanted him to come back to Minnesota. And now he ends up in the Hall of Fame. Very well deserved. The cream of the crop for class individuals, the way they represent their franchise, the way they represent the community, all those things. Justin Jefferson reminds me, in the way that he's handled things recently, of Larry Fitzgerald. An easy selection. Drew Brees, also an easy selection. No Kevin Williams. Man, it's tough to get in the Hall of Fame. It's just so tough. And as I was reading Mark Craig from the Star Tribune, his breakdown of his votes and what he, went through with the process and players that he eliminated and so forth, the thing I kept coming back to was that I just won't understand when it's Kevin Williams, when it's Jim Marshall, whoever it might be, is why there's a convoluted system of, well, we're going to eliminate it from 15 to 10 and 10 to 5 and 5 to 2 and 2 to 1, and then no one gets in the Hall of Fame ever. Like, I don't understand this. The same thing with Bill Belichick and Robert Kraft, where it's, well, if I want L.C. Greenwood, who was a great player for the Pittsburgh Steelers in their dynasty, if I want him in, then I can't have Belichick, but I know Belichick is deserving, but he'll probably get in next year. And these people who are doing the voting are forced to do a bunch of calculations, and it's some sort of survivor game that, why? Shouldn't the question be yes or no? Isn't that how baseball does it? Like, doesn't baseball give you a ballot and then you fill it out and you pick like so many or just whoever you think should be in? I have never looked at this for baseball. I don't cover that sport, but isn't it just a ballot and you say check or no check? why isn't it that way for the Hall of Fame, for the NFL in football? Why isn't it that way? Where it's a ballot and you decide yes or no. Here's the finalists. Okay, you got to get to finalists. Here's the finalists. In, no in. And if that meant putting in 10 guys in a year, okay. And I'll continue to say this. It's a museum, folks. It's a museum. It's not a key to the kingdom of heaven. All right. It's a museum. And it's there to celebrate the greatness of football. And the players that are left out of this thing, the greatness that's left out of this thing is just insane. Including Belichick, but also guys who didn't make the last cut. Kevin Williams is one of them. Reggie Wayne is another. Like Reggie Wayne, I mean, to not have so many of the best. And then you say to those guys, all right, yeah, Willie Anderson's another one. My goodness. One of the best tackles in the NFL for so long. And nope, sorry, man, you're not going to get in there. Oh, we can't have all these guys in the Hall of Fame. Why not? I think we all know Reggie White was better than, Jared Allen or something. Like we don't need a Hall of Fame of Hall of Fames and then another. No, put in the best players from eras and have people be excited for them and celebrate them and go to Canton and watch them give their speeches. And that's it. That's what should be happening. But instead it's this bizarro type of thing that looks like something that was invented from a national TV network to build drama. But instead it's not, it's just the NFL. So let me get you the FanDuel question of the day, and then we will get to your questions, comments, thoughts, and feelings. The FanDuel question of the day is this. The over-under for this game, the big game, the Super Bowl, is 45.5 points. So what's your score? Mine is 24-17 Seattle. Give me your score. That's all I want. That's the FanDuel question of the day. It's that simple. And it's your one shot. And if you get it right, I don't know. I should come up with something. Like, you can't mail a Diet Dr. Pepper, right? How about a signed Diet Dr. Pepper can by me to the winner? Who wouldn't want this? To the winner in the comment section. You could send me, if you get it right, send me an email, MatthewColler@gmail. If you get it right and you get a signed Diet Dr. Pepper can or something. Maybe I should give a copy of my book. How about that? Okay, let's get your comments here. And some of you were saying like, hey, you're late. And I've been messing around. You know that I always screw around with different things and stuff, trying to get the comments on the screen, trying to figure out where to put them. And that was why I was 2 minutes late starting the live stream. So now I've got them right down in front of me here. So you guys can read them and not like half of a giant black, nothingness or whatever, which is what I've had for the last few days. So, all right, let's get into your comments here. Yes, and here's you guys talking about me being late, but go to the Pure Wildcat next season. That's funny. Joe Burrow is nonsense. I think it means Burrow is on the table. That's really funny. That one person says it means Burrow is nonsense, and the other says it means he's absolutely on the table. I think with Joe Burrow and that potential, and I'll tell you something really funny. Like, I try not to go into the hot take universe and all that, you know that. And I try not to reach and stretch to just make something into a thing that isn't a thing. But there was a little bit of me today that went, when I was watching, naturally, an NFL Films recap of the best sounds of the game. So it was 8 minutes of people, big hits and stuff like that, the NFL film stuff. And some of it's funny. Some of it includes Vikings or random things that happen or trash talk. So I'm like, okay, I'll click that. And Joe Burrow is on the sideline with Joe Flacco, and they're sitting on the bench. And Joe Burrow says to Joe Flacco, he says, I used to not mind getting hit, but now I can't stand it. And Flacco, who's a psycho, as you saw from the clip on Kevin Clark's show, if you didn't see it, I don't know. He was talking to whatever, NFL, football's soft now or whatever, that whole thing. But Flacco just kind of goes, yeah, I know what you mean. Old, you're getting old or whatever. But I thought, Joe Burrow He's tired of getting hit. Cincinnati, huh? They've been getting Joe Burrow hit a lot, Cincinnati, over the years. Wonder if there was a place that had a little better offensive line that maybe he might not get hit as much. Although this offense is not built for that. This offense gets people hit a lot. So maybe that's not it. But it just crossed my mind. Like, Joe Burrow just didn't seem like he was having a whole heck of a lot of fun last year. That's what it looked like. And he said that straight out. And so I can't talk too much about that, as in, let me bang the drum every day for get Joe Burrow, because I don't think Cincinnati can do it. I know they could do it from a financial perspective, and I know the Vikings could figure that out somehow, but from a you're going to let go your franchise quarterback perspective, one of the 5 to 7 best quarterbacks in the league perspective, it just seems unlikely unless Burrow demands it. And if he does, then the level of back that the Minnesota Vikings are from the depths would be insane. I would not totally entirely count out something like that because of what happened with Carson Palmer. That franchise lives by a different set of rules. They do not spend money. They don't have a practice facility. They're just kind of a team that is from 25 years ago, 35 years ago. And Burrow it looks pretty exhausted of it. And Justin Jefferson plays here. So I don't know. You never know. I don't want to completely count that out. Can you call it nonsense? Yes, you can right now. Can you say it's also not even if he was traded for and came here, it would not be the craziest thing that's ever happened to the Vikings. Let's see. Is the Purple Insider neon light new? My old setup, it is sort of new and sort of not. I always struggled to get it in the screen. So now that I got the new setup here, I wanted to highlight my little football man behind me. So yeah, it's new-ish, new adjacent. Let's see. Stuart says, how much derp if Sam folds in the Super Bowl? There will be a lot of derp if Sam folds in the Super Bowl. And what I will say is that Sam Darnold is in the Super Bowl. So that's something that has not happened to the Minnesota Vikings since 1977. But at the same time, when it's one game and everyone's watching it and everyone has to have a take, I'm absolutely certain that if Sam Darnold struggles, there will be all along he was never good enough, and this is why no one ever really believed in him. I'm sure. I mean, Brock Purdy kind of had that happen where one throw gets knocked away at the end of the Super Bowl, and they end up having to go to overtime instead of winning it, and it was like, Jimmy Garoppolo is another example. And I never thought Jimmy G was great, but when he was healthy, see, that goes forgotten about Garoppolo's. He was never healthy. When he was healthy, I thought he was a very good quarterback. He overthrows one ball. They can't get a stop on 3rd and 20. And then it's like, yep, see, Garoppolo stinks. Like, why do we do this? Why do we do this? Elway and Mahomes and Brady have all had bad Super Bowls. And, it happens. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see about how he plays. I mean, if he doesn't play well, I'm sure there will be like he couldn't really do it. I want to win the Super Bowl, not just get there. Like that comment will show up, I'm sure, in our reaction right after the Super Bowl, which Manny and I will be going live right after the Super Bowl ends. But I mean, we all know that's silly, and he played well enough. One thing about this Super Bowl and Sam Darnold, though, is that I don't think, we all like, I think about constantly about what Dan Campbell said about like, hey, this could be your only shot. I think about that all the time. And I do think that if you're Sam Darnold, you're on a really good team that could continue to be good, but it might very well be the only shot he ever gets in his career. And I've always thought of it this way for quarterbacks, or I think a couple years ago, I started thinking of it this way, of how many shots you get at a Super Bowl in your career kind of tells us what tier you're in as a quarterback. And, some guys have changed over the years. Matthew Stafford having multiple shots at it not getting to the Super Bowl necessarily, but in the playoffs, great teams. That would have surprised me, I think, years ago, but so you can get better. Someone like Sam Darnold, is he a multiple chance guy? Is this the best chance? Will this continue forever of winning 14 games every year? Like, probably not. This probably is the best chance. And you would say Drake May will get more opportunities. I think that's probably true, but no guarantees. You saw what happened with Jaden Daniels. Let's see. Fillmore wants to trade for Davis Mills to compete. I have bad news about Davis Mills is that he's not very good. Davis Mills last year, his PFF grade and his success rate last year were no better than JJ McCarthy's. He just won 3 games because their defense was awesome. But McCarthy won some games because their defense was awesome. It doesn't mean that he's a starting quarterback. And they didn't have as good of a team as the Vikings, but he played so safe and so conservative. And when he didn't and was a starter a few years ago, they were awful. Davis Mills is a good backup quarterback, and that is it. Josh says KOC fell in love with the idea of the rookie quarterback. I think that that's true. There is maybe an interesting, if we only knew his therapist and could get the notes from those sessions of what he said about wanting the young quarterback so he could live his dream through them. I don't know. Maybe that's true. Maybe it's not. I'm just being facetious there, but it did feel like the reason that they wanted McCarthy instead of Bo Nix was that McCarthy was younger. He was more raw. He was maybe easier to mold into the style that O'Connell wanted. He saw JJ McCarthy as a guy who maybe gelled and connected with him and had a lot of the same sort of views of football and of offenses. And, when you're in the room with JJ McCarthy, I think he's an impressive guy. You've seen that at the podium when, the world's not making fun of him for giving himself a nickname at some point. Like, a lot of his interviews are very impressive, especially when he was coming out in the draft. And I think they did see something that they could build on and grow with and so forth. And sorry, I cut that last part off there. I was trying to get the Vikings flag in the screen. But I think that he saw JJ McCarthy as raw tools and a work ethic and a drive that had a higher ceiling than someone like Bo Nix. We do need to remember about the draft pick. They only had a choice between 2 guys. That Michael Penix was off the board. I think Penix would have been a good fit here. I don't know he's going to be a great quarterback. And if it came down to McCarthy and Nix, a lot of people would have said that McCarthy was the better prospect. And, Nix, there was a lot of, hey, Nix is a 2nd round pick from people. I thought his college numbers were great, but when it comes to the Darnold thing, there's more layers to it than just the one of, hey, they wanted McCarthy over Darnold. There's money involved, there's dynamics involved, and all that sort of stuff. The one thing that I will say that if this is true, then you talk about all bets are off, for my opinion. When Diana Rossini had said that they thought that they might, quote, lose JJ McCarthy if he didn't start. If that's the reason that they went to him, then that would completely change my opinion of that decision, because I've always thought, yes, it was very, very risky, but I understood why they did it. And it looks as bad as it's ever going to look, but I get it. Like, I get what they were going for in trying to do it. But if the main reason was that they thought they were going to lose him, if you had concerns like that about his mental and emotional ability to handle the NFL, which I think are very fair questions at this point, then you should not have been going with him. Let's see. Janice says trade Grenard to San Francisco for Mac Jones. You free up cap, preserve draft picks, and get a starting quality quarterback. I think that's giving up way too much for Mac Jones. I mean, you're talking about somebody who's a backup quarterback. I mean, Jonathan Grenard is a star level player. I know that last year he didn't get as many sacks as the year before, but he still had great numbers when it came to pressures. His overall performance since he's been a Viking has been around the ballpark in terms of creating pressure as an elite player. Yes, it does open up for Dallas Turner to slide into that spot, But to me, that's just giving up way too much. I'm thinking more of like 3rd round draft pick type of thing. Not give up a really, really good player. I think you could get him for less than that, but San Francisco's price for him is going to be very interesting. Is San Francisco's going to get offers, and what is it that they want for Mac Jones? I mean, I think if you're Kyle Shanahan, you're probably like, okay, I like Mac Jones, and I know that there's concerns about Brock Purdy, but I've done this with multiple quarterbacks. Like, why not get extra draft capital that I need for my future for a backup quarterback? I could see them definitely doing that. Dan says, if the Wilfs have KOC on a short leash, then just fire KOC and start fresh. Why the Wilfs never get to a Super Bowl? The Wilfs becoming a huge conversation has been a little tricky for me to sort through, because I don't think that we have often talked about them very much and where they fit in. And then when they fire a GM on January 30th, then it does open, especially right after their former quarterback makes the Super Bowl, it does open to more scrutiny and to more questions of, well, wait, are they too reactionary, or did they, not have their fingers on the pulse and so forth? And where I somewhat agree with you, and I understand where you're coming from, is I've often said, if you're thinking about firing the coach, then fire the coach. But I think with O'Connell, there's so much that's good that's happened here, which you won't find too much of in most comment sections, but it is true. And there's also a lot here that leaves questions, and you do need more of a sample size. Instead of, like, I've made the comparison of like dating, where if you are going out with someone and you're thinking about breaking up with them, well, then you should just break up with them. If you're thinking about divorce, well, I mean, then your relationship's probably not in good shape anyway, and you should probably just move on, right? But this one is more like you've had a lot of good times and you've had some rocky times, and you're just not really sure what this really is. That's more along the lines of what it is. It's just not quite, like you're not quite sure entirely. Storm says, keep JJ McCarthy. Vikings fans need to chill. It's not Vikings fans who are making these decisions, man. It's not Vikings fans who went to the podium and said, and this is why it's funny where media or fans or whoever will get lashed out upon for JJ McCarthy defenders. It's like, we weren't the ones up at that podium who had every chance, as Kevin O'Connell did, to say, yes, JJ McCarthy is our quarterback. And he's going to go to the combine and he's going to dance around it there too. He danced around it after week 18. He danced around it in the press conference. He'll dance around it at the combine, and Mark Wilf didn't even bring it up. So to me, and now his teammates are at Radio Row being like, yeah, I wish we had Sam. I mean, I don't know what more you want. The numbers aren't great. There's so much pressure. There's so many good players on this team. It's not fans who need to chill. It's the reality of the NFL is you can't just put all of your eggs into a basket with somebody who has proven nothing and has left way more questions than answers, especially about whether they can even stay healthy. So it isn't some sort of like, oh, people being irrational, fans being irrational. No, it's not that. I mean, this is just, if your job was on the line on whether JJ McCarthy played well in 2026 or not, would you want him being the sole guy going into camp? No way. Phenom says we need to give him another year. If he stinks, we could draft another quarterback, which sounds great. But if you give him another year and you end up wasting another season of Cashman, Grenard, Van Ginkel, Hockenson, if he's here, Jefferson, you might lose Jefferson. I mean, if that's how much this 2026 season swings on things. If I'm Justin Jefferson and this team goes another year where I'm squeaking out to 1,000 yards because the quarterbacks can't get me the football, I am going to my agent and saying, all right, what do we need to do? Whose podcast do I need to go on and demand a trade? Or what do I need to, I mean, right? Because I know that Jefferson wants to be here through thick and thin, but he's also not a fool. I mean, he's not going to sit here and wait as he watches other wide receivers have good quarterbacks put up huge numbers and just sit around and wait for them to find someone who could throw the ball accurately. He's not going to do that. So there's so much on the line. And I mean, theoretically, I get where you're coming from, but I just don't think you could do that. When will we get a Harrison Smith decision? That I do not know, but I would have to assume that it is before free agency. It has to be before free agency. He can't leave the team twisting in the wind at the safety position. Last year, that's when he told them he was coming back. So I imagine he will be telling them this year what is going to happen. I suspect retirement, but, I don't really know. Mr. Mayor, if JJ couldn't succeed with everything that he had around him, he can't succeed anywhere. Well, I mean, he could potentially succeed with more development with these things around him, but that is a true factor when we think about, his numbers and his performance it's not like a number one pick like Cam Ward who had nothing. Phenom says Ponder got 36 games, but JJ should only get 10. Okay, well, here's my question for you. Did you know after 10 games with Ponder? I'm going to guess that you did. I'm going to guess that you did. That you knew after 10 games with Ponder, this probably wasn't going to work out. How many quarterbacks that were not drafted in the top 5 after 10 games could you say yay or nay and be right? I mean, Sam Darnold, you'd be wrong. But there's not that. I mean, even Baker Mayfield, who is, painted as this guy that was a bust, he was not a bust in Cleveland. He had an 11-win season. He won a playoff game for them, and then things devolved after that. He had some ups and downs, as he still continues to do, but he showed plenty of potential in his first 10 games. I know he's a number 1 overall pick, but most quarterbacks who end up staying with their team long term, they either had the worst teams like Jared Goff with the Rams, or I guess you could say Bryce Young with the Panthers, or they were pretty good and went forward from there. You just don't see very often someone who's drafted as the 5th quarterback in a draft class, 10th overall, and the team just waits forever to find out. The Magic Man says JJ has a fastball. Arm talent is much more than that. Yep, that's very true. And the fact that he did not get many reps of actually throwing, that's why it's hard to buy into that he's suddenly going to figure out touch. And when the Josh Allen example is used, he didn't really figure out throwing until 2020, which was his 3rd season, in which he had already thrown like 800 passes in NFL games. And he still lacks touch at times where he just whips it through anyone. Josh says JJ was all sizzle, no steak. It was the potential they fell in love with when he literally only threw 700 in college. Yes, what they thought was, and I don't think this process is really that bad, was that he was raw and there was a lot of physical talent there, which we see. Velocity on the football, athleticism. Yes, we see all of that, right? And what they thought was very, very high intangibles. It turns out that intangibles in the NFL are a completely different monster than intangibles in high school or intangibles in college. It's just a whole different world and a whole different league, and the amount of pressure on him was not anything like he had ever faced before. But yes, they did see a player that they had planned to get Sam Darnold, play him for probably half the season until the wheels came off. They thought that was what was going to happen, and then go to JJ McCarthy. That was the expectation, but it didn't work out that way because, Darnold played as well as he did. And also because McCarthy didn't have that key time to develop, and missing all of that, it was catastrophic to his development and being ready this year. I think that we'll never really know what he would have been had he continued to grow, because in 2024 camp, it is an absolute fact. Ask anybody who was there or Kevin O'Connell calling him the franchise quarterback. McCarthy had made remarkable progress in terms of throwing the ball, not just running the offense or whatever, but I mean like being in command of the offense and throwing the football, throwing with more touch, throwing with timing, throwing with accuracy. And I think that if he had gotten a full year behind the scenes, that those things would have continued to manifest themselves. And, somebody brought up Malik Willis. And the thing about Malik Willis is he's thrown very few passes too, but he has thrown a million passes behind the scenes. And he has developed more and more accuracy and anticipation and those things that we talk about from throwing every day in practice. Whereas McCarthy has missed so much practice. Not only did he miss the whole year, but he also missed weeks 3 through whatever it was, 8. That's all practice. And then you miss the game against Seattle, and you miss the time leading up to, let's see, it would have been some of the time leading up to the last game after getting hurt against the Giants. I mean, you're just missing a lot of time and development. So it's not that it could ever be possible. It's that he just hasn't had the time to be able to do it. And these things, when you think about, how about this way? I am a decent golfer, and I would love to be a great golfer. Oh man. Like, you know how people would say, if you could have 3 wishes or whatever, would you wish for $1 million? Would you wish for, no. I'm good with everything. I would wish to be a scratch golfer. That's what I would want to be, but you know why I can't get there? Is because I only get to play like once a week in the summer. And then freaking Minnesota is the place that I chose to live, and it is cold as hell, and I can't get out there and play golf. So I will never get there. If I am not practicing golf all the time, and think about every other quarterback in the world that's not hurt, I would say the same thing for Trey Lance and Anthony Richardson. Those guys had potential. They just couldn't get there because, in part, they never had time where they were truly healthy and working on it. So the concept, the idea of drafting the raw quarterback, developing him behind the veteran, working with him behind the scenes, and then turning the ball over to him the following season, it made all the sense in the world. And then a grenade got dropped on their plan, and that's where they should have adjusted. And they didn't. And now, quote, all bets are off. Dan Campbell, I think, is under pressure. You guys are talking about coaches. LaFleur just got an extension, but I don't know. You never know. Mr. Mayor, I think Kwesi probably lowballed Darnold on purpose. No, I don't think it's that. I think if there's one guy that got maybe a little lowballed, it was Daniel Jones. I also don't think that he was staying. I don't think there's any world where Sam Darnold comes back and has to compete for his job or feel like the fans want something else. I think he would have come back if they had tagged him because he had to, or if they had said, we're trading JJ McCarthy, or like, even if they said you're not in competition with JJ McCarthy, you know that you kind of are, because if you went 2-3 to start the season, the cries would be insanely loud for JJ McCarthy. So you would have had to trade him. And that would have been one of the most unpopular moves ever if they traded McCarthy, considering how much they had built him up. Derek says, I wish owners could be on the hot seat. 3 playoff wins in 20 years is a complete disaster. It is really tough to have 3 playoff wins in 20 years. I think I'd have to check this. I checked it before the playoffs. They're like 21st in playoff wins since they took over. It all goes back to the quarterback. I really believe that it all goes back to the quarterback. There are times where, yes, they should have said, we need to take a step back. We need to really rebuild this and draft a quarterback high. I mean, if you think about it, when is the last time the Minnesota Vikings have drafted 9th or higher? So McCarthy is 10th. But those draft picks that make the Hall of Fame and change franchises, how many times? Matt Khalil, is that the only time? Anthony Barr, right, was 9th. So what? 2014. I mean, when you go a decade without a top 10 draft pick, it's very hard to find elite players. They've been able to do it with Jefferson. They've been able to do it with Diggs before, Thielen before, Everson Griffin. I mean, only kind of by the will of good evaluation, good coaching, luck, but never by just drafting at the top. So if you never draft that top quarterback and you're always picking either the 5th quarterback or somebody else's quarterback up, it's really, really hard to land on a Drake May type thing. That doesn't mean they should tank, next year, but after this runs out, you have, and I always say tank and it's crass. I just mean like take a longer term approach. I mean, you don't have to lose on purpose. People get so offended by that, but it's like, just take a longer term approach. 2020, or how about like 20? I remember saying this and then having to delete the tweet because people got so pissed. But I said in 2022, if the Vikings had had Mariota instead of Kirk Cousins, they would have and lost a few more games, but not like even given the chance to have Kirk as the quarterback in 2023. Like it would have been fine. And I got a lot of pushback because they were 8-1 or whatever. And it was like, no, Mariota stinks. It's like, that's not the point. The point is you weren't going to win that year, even with all the victories that you had by one score in Miami or, a double doink field goal or whatever. That's how it always feels with this team. Is it always feels like people get tricked by a little bit of success and then go crazy and try to do stuff to make that success sustain, but it's not going to sustain if you don't have that guy at quarterback consistently. Hogarth says, not going to lie, I want to trade Jefferson. No, you don't. I mean, maybe if you're a Bears fan or something. Oh, I see what you mean. Jefferson on this team is like having gold rims on a car that won't start. Yeah, I see what you're saying. For the best of him. The Magic Man, I don't think we're trading for Mac Jones. A lot of you haven't accepted, but Kirk Cousins is the best option for us. We're lucky that Jefferson is not a diva. I know, that's for sure. When it comes to Kirk Cousins coming back, he did give I saw, and he's a very good broadcaster, and I'm excited for his future as a broadcaster. I think he'll be very, very good. He was doing Radio Row interviews, and he was asked, of course, about Minnesota, and he gave a little bit of a wry, like, we'll see. And I was like, oh, Kirk is coming back. How about a Kirk Aaron Rodgers quarterback competition? Mr. Mayor, should KOC be on the hot seat? He's supposed to be an offensive genius, and in 5 years, we've never had a top 10 offense. Well, what were they in scoring in 2024? I mean, if you're referring to like DVOA, I get it. And I love DVOA and other data, but I would do, if you say a scoring offense, I would do by how many points they actually scored as opposed to like theoretical yardage. Not that it's not telling or not that it's not good as a statistic, as a guidepost, but they were 9th in 2024 in actual points scored, as you could see there from my little box on the window. But yeah, so I was checking that, but they had a good enough offense in 2024 to compete. They did not have a good enough running game or offensive line in 2024 to win a Super Bowl. And had they had Christian Darrisaw be healthy, Aaron Jones was averaging 5 yards a carry when Christian Darrisaw got hurt. It really was a catastrophic thing that happened. We don't talk about it a lot because it's a left tackle and it's not a hot topic necessarily compared to the quarterback, but just the ripple effect of losing Darrisaw. They don't beat the Rams if they have Darrisaw. Everyone else got beat too. But I was looking this up the other day that Cam Robinson in that game against the Rams, that was all Sam's fault, gave up 12 pressures. 12. If you give up 6 as a tackle, that's pretty bad. He gave up 12 in that game. Christian Darrisaw getting hurt, then they couldn't run into the end zone against the Lions. They had opportunity. Like, it had this ripple effect, and it impacted McCarthy too. Because in week 2, he doesn't have Darrisaw. It's Justin School. He's getting torched. I mean, that's had a big, big impact on how things have played out. But I think it had a really big impact last year in that playoff game. Hunter says, KOC the best coach in the NFC North, or no? I mean, I think the NFC North has good coaching across the board. I think LaFleur's a good coach. Certainly Dan Campbell. I mean, Ben Johnson's done a great job in Chicago. So no, I don't think he's the best, but I think that they're all good, and yet none of them have gotten their teams over the hump. Magic Man says he's number 2 behind Ben Johnson. I think when it comes to Kevin O'Connell and how good of a coach he is, it's so funny that it always depends on like when we're talking about what just recently happened. I think that goes for any coach. What just recently happened with that coach determines a lot of how people feel about that coach and whether they think he's good or not. But I think the larger sample on O'Connell is that here's what it says to me. There's enough there to win with if ... There is enough there to win with Kevin O'Connell if he can figure out the run game and help his quarterbacks not get sacked so much. The run game becomes this obsession, sort of like in Buffalo with the wide receivers. It just becomes this thing we just bang the drum over and over on. But look, when you're the worst team in the league on 3rd and 4th and 1, and you can't punch it into the end zone against Detroit when you need it, and there were other games in 2024 that it was like that. And I mean, in Detroit in week 18 in 2024. And when you could certainly beat the Philadelphia Eagles if you committed to it in that game, down by the goal line, could not get the ball into the end zone. Those shortcomings have to be corrected. Frank Smith has been brought in from Miami. I think that's a big deal toward correcting it. I think they're going to invest in the backfield in someone younger. Maybe Rashard White is somebody who's come up that I thought maybe from Tampa Bay, had a pretty good year last year. Javonte Williams, I don't love for a fit, but they need explosiveness. They need maybe someone in the draft. The player matters there. The offensive line matters there, but you can't have your quarterbacks getting sacked 50 times a year, every year. That cannot happen. So that has to be fixed. And I think that's connected in some ways to the run game. I also think that Kevin O'Connell said something very interesting. I asked him at the end of the year about adjusting his offense, and he said something to the effect of realizing, this may have been after the Lions game, actually. Maybe it wasn't to my question, but he said something to the effect of, yeah, I realize that sometimes you just need to grind it out and win a game a certain way that you don't necessarily want to win it. It's like, oh, an epiphany, which is sometimes you have to win a way that you don't want to win. Kevin O'Connell wants to win, 31-17, where he gets ahead with huge explosive plays out of the start, and then their defense takes over. And when you think he's going to run the clock out, he hits another explosive play. Like, that's what he wants to do. But you can't always win that way. Sometimes you got to win by grinding the team out. The backfield has not had those guys, though. Delvin Cook's second half of the year 2022 fell apart. Aaron Jones, second half of 2024. Jones gets hurt this year. They haven't really had those guys. I think that's part of it. You can't get your quarterback sacked so much, and you have to be able to run the ball in those key spots and build off of a successful run game if you're not going to have Drake May as your quarterback. But even him, they build off the run game. I mean, everybody is doing it now in the NFL because of how nasty these defenses are. And I was thinking about something about just how more stunts and twists and things like that are just jumping up every single year by the numbers. And you got to punish those things by being able to run the ball and catch them trying to run a stunt or a blitz or whatever, and make them pay for some of that. Or otherwise, they're just going to do it. They didn't make the Rams pay for it. They just ran after the quarterback all night in 2024. And now here's Seattle. Sam Darnold gets sacked 27 times this year. Sam Darnold, could this be true? I got to look this up. Did Sam Darnold get sacked the same amount of times as JJ McCarthy this year? Because that would be crazy. I got to check this. I got to check. Hold on. Oh my gosh. It was. Sam Darnold got sacked the same amount of times as JJ McCarthy. That's crazy. That's a young quarterback getting sacked a lot, but Sam Darnold's sack number went down by like 20. You have to figure out a way to protect your quarterbacks. That's number one. And I think that you have to figure out, that run game part of it as well. But I also think that Kevin O'Connell can win if he's got the right quarterback. It's clear, I think, now from everything that's being said, that whether JJ McCarthy can succeed or not, eventually, fair to wonder and fair to even believe in. For his biggest fans, it is fair for you to say, why are we calling it after 10 games? Guys have long careers. Totally. And Steve Young was with Tampa Bay, and they were terrible, and it didn't work out, and so forth. And there's lots of quarterbacks who have done it. But is this the right fit quarterback for him? Like, is this even the right fit for Kevin O'Connell for what kind of quarterback he wanted? That's something we got to think about too. FanDuel question of the day was 45.5 is the over-under for this game on FanDuel. What are your score predictions? Jim had it 28-23. Phenom has got 38-13. There was a 41-0 in there. Mr. Mayor, 35-10. Hogarth, not the 41 donut. It does feel like all of the dollars are being put on Seattle. Philip said all bets are off. What trade pieces would you offer Seattle for Sam Darnold? That's very funny. It does feel like all the money is going on the Seattle Seahawks. I did write down keys to the game for the Super Bowl. Would you like them? Here's what I wrote for keys to the game. And let me switch that away from my notes there. I got a couple of matchups that I really am interested in the Super Bowl. Number one, it looks like Nicky Manware is back. That's a big deal. And the defensive backs of Seattle versus the short passing game of New England, because they do hit on deep shots, but they have to control the game on short passing. And Eamon is just an absolute animal who can go sideline to sideline, can blitz, is a great tackler. And now that he's going to play and he's healthy, that's a major factor. So if you don't let Drake May get into a rhythm and control the game with underneath passing because of your tackling, Julian Love is another guy that's huge for this. That's factor number one. Factor number two is the interior lines. Man, this is why the other night in my draft sim, some people didn't love it, but in my draft sim, I had the Vikings taking an interior D lineman. And where you look at a Byron Murphy, Leonard Williams is kind of a different kind of beast, but still, you look at him, I think they can control this game from the interior. The run game, getting after Drake May. So that's factor number two. Sam Darnold early in the game. I mean, first throw, first drive. Do they try to get him to throw something deep like to Rashid Shaheed to just get him going? Or do they slowly build to it? Do they run a little, do a little bootleg, get him that first completion, shake out the nerves? Because if you remember, and I know you all thought this, in that game against Detroit, week 18, when he missed Hockenson wide open. And there's maybe an argument that Hockenson should have been able to bring it in, but it was a very tough ball. And he just missed. That was one he hit all year long. It was like, okay, Sam a little bit anxious out there. And I do think he has a tendency to get a little bit overamped up. But when he hit the big throw against, against the Rams, it was like, okay, I think Sam's locked in. So his first 5 throws of the game, what do those look like? I think is a big factor. Which team gets it going on the ground? Kenneth Walker. They don't have Zach Charbonnet. They do have a duo for New England. If New England could create a run game at all, then they could take their shots downfield. And May is as good as anyone throwing deep. And then special teams. That was my 5th factor. These are 2 good special teams. They got good kickers, good punt return teams, all pro at punt returner on New England's side, great punt returner on Seattle's side. So there are your 5 keys to go along with the FanDuel question of the day. Dan's got 26-12 Patriots. Mahal says they never got Burrow O-line. His career could be cut short like Luck. Vikings should get 5 sumo wrestlers. Brian's got 27-16. Magic Man says we deserve Burrow. Vikings fans, all Vikings fans do is cry about our offensive line. That's true. But I think now if Darisaw comes back healthy and you get a center, that would be the best offensive line that Joe Burrow's ever had. He also does cause some of it. Cause and effect. What did you take away from Jefferson's conversation with Florio and Sims? Do you think that he's sending a clear message to the organization, namely KOC? I don't think that Justin Jefferson, with any sort of intent, sends messages to his coach, to his quarterback. I think that Justin Jefferson is a very earnest person, and he always has been. And because he is a really likable guy, his honesty, and because he walks the walk, his honesty has always gone over pretty well. But I remember when he was asked about his top 5 quarterbacks and he was like, Burrow, Mahomes, like he just, I don't even remember if he even had Kirk. And then he was like, well, I thought naming Kirk would make me biased, but I also think he was just answering the question and that no one actually thinks that Kirk is a top 5 quarterback. So he just said it. Like, that's him. You can kind of, if you ask him these questions, he will just answer them. I don't think he's ever had and look, he did a great job with us this year. We gave him the Media Good Guy award. It was an incredible amount of patience that he had with us and with the whole situation and everything. But I don't think he's like a built in a lab PR machine. He's a guy who loves football and will tell you the truth. And I think when it comes to him, he has not lost one shred of belief that Justin Jefferson is still the best out there. But he's very aware that the quarterback situation and maybe some of the offense and the way it's designed caused him to have less than what he expected of himself. And that is not acceptable to him. This is a guy who's very interesting because he comes across like very, very friendly as anybody you'll ever run into. But he's also as deeply competitive as anyone you'll ever run into. And I remember when we asked him something like, hey, so, you did so well. What's your goals for next year? And he was like, I don't want anyone else to be talked about as the number 1 receiver in the NFL except me. And we were like, okay, well, there's a lot of good receivers. And he was like, no, I'm serious. So like, he's always been very serious about that. And this year, I think as much as he was the good soldier, the franchise player, I think he was probably as upset as you could ever imagine behind the scenes at what happened, at the number of throws that went flying over his head. And not just because he's about his own numbers. I mean, this guy has been in the league now since 2020 and he wants to win. The fact that this franchise does not have a playoff win since 2019 and has not been into, when is the last time they even had multiple playoff wins? I think it's 87. No, is it 98, right? They had 98. When is that? Or did they? Because they would have had the bye. No, so is it 87? Is 87 the last time they had multiple playoff wins? I mean, my gosh. This guy wants to win. He wants to win more than anything. So going into the season, it's a big, big deal for him to get back on track. And that's why all bets are off. That's why you can't go into the season as the Vikings and be like, okay, work with JJ in the offseason, it'll be fine. Like, no. You can't do that. Maverick says if Burrow leaves Cincinnati, he'll go to the Rams. I mean, hey, the Vikings have his old teammate, Jefferson. Dan, what's my favorite gaming system? I mean, if I wanted to be truly like the highbrow gamer, I might say Sega Dreamcast. Then like, oh, okay, this guy knows. The one that I play the most is PS2 though. PS2 Madden 05, 2K. I got NBA 2K5 in there. I was actually planning to play NBA 2K5 with Allen Iverson like last weekend. That was the plan. It was, you know what? There's nothing on. I'm just going to like clean the house and play some video games. No. The Vikings had different plans. Douglas says bring Derek Carr out of retirement. N64 is also, yes. Those are the PS2 and N64. I see Derek Carr doing a lot of podcasting, and it feels like Derek Carr is sort of, there's a little bit of winking and does somebody want to ask me to play quarterback? They asked Phillip Rivers, but I mean, you can't count anything out. If you were to give me that as the option of bringing back Derek Carr, oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. The problem with Derek Carr is that he has been really banged up. Now, maybe after a year away from the game, that his body will be in better shape and he would, maybe he's been practicing behind the scenes and he could step right. I don't know. That seems like a long shot because the guy feels like he's retired. But if you put Derek Carr, an average Derek Carr season with the Vikings last year, they're winning 11 games. That's a better option than Kyler Murray. That's a better option. Maybe. I like the Murray thing a lot more than you guys do, but it's a better option than Mac Jones or, a lot of these other guys. This is a real quarterback, a real starter who could get you to the playoffs. I don't know how the ceiling is, but it might be pretty high if he's back to 100% health. Lenny says all the games Darnold looked bad last year were on the road or neutral site game in the playoffs. I think he might crumble when he isn't at home. Is that true? I don't think that's true. I was in Seattle on the road in a tough environment when he threw a sick touchdown to Justin Jefferson. Everybody's brain melts. Whatever we saw last is just, that's why I use analytics so much, because analytics don't have these selection biases. Like, well, he went on the road and didn't play well, it must mean he melts. Like, no, well, he didn't last year. No, when he went on the road. He went to Green Bay and beat the Packers at Green Bay in Lambeau and played awesome. Like, I don't know. Or like played awesome for the first half to get them up by 20 points. I don't know. I don't know. Look, you're playing in the Super Bowl. It's best versus best. These are the two best teams in the league. They're there. And who knows what's going to happen. There's been shocking blowouts. There's been not surprising blowouts. There's been all-time classics. There's everything all over the spectrum in the Super Bowl. You never have any idea going into it what's really going to happen. I don't know how he's going to play. But, I mean, with that, just when it comes to how we view players in general, it seems to often be the last thing we saw is the truth about that player. It is possible, Magic Man, it is possible that Darnold will go 14-3 every year. Yeah, I guess so. I think, and Maverick, you're right that Seattle is a young team. You could see them getting back. It's just that they are also the healthiest team. And that always happens, right? Last year with Philadelphia, healthiest team in the NFL. I think they were missing one player. Seattle's missing their number 2 running back, who is good, but I mean, my gosh, 5 starting offensive linemen healthy. And then you have 5 starting or 4 starting defensive linemen healthy, secondary healthy, quarterback healthy. I mean, if you give a good amount of teams that, you're probably going to get good results from them, because there's just, and I know depth becomes this thing of, like, how many teams' fan bases on their reporters' live stream, they're like, we need more depth. Like, everyone, because no one has it. So if you could stay healthy, that's how you get to the Super Bowl. That's what I mean about Darnold, is not only did their team stay healthy, but Jackson Smith-Njigba had basically a historic year. And it is pronounced for the jackass on the NFL awards, Jackson Smith-Njigba. So maybe work on it next time. That was so embarrassing. Felt really bad for him. It's a great moment in his life, and this guy has to screw around with his name. Anyway, Jackson Smith-Njigba has been unbelievable this year. Kenneth Walker has had a great season. Their offensive line has been healthy. And then the path to the Super Bowl was really laid out for them. You basically have to play one game. San Francisco shows up with half a squad because they're built next to a power plant or something. That's a joke. But they show up with half of their team and they beat the tar out of them. The game's over in 5 minutes. They barely had to play to get to the Super Bowl. It was one game, them Rams, and it was a hell of a game. But that's all they had to do. Is there going to be another year where all your guys stay healthy? Your wide receiver has a historic year. Your running game is great. Clint Kubiak's leaving. We saw the impact of that for Detroit. I mean, yes, I agree. This is a strong roster for the future, but it's so delicate to get to the Super Bowl. It might be his only chance. Mr. Maris says, have you talked about Matthew Stafford winning MVP on the show? Super happy about that. Now he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. Oh man, who is a Hall of Famer? I don't know if Matthew Stafford is a first ballot Hall of Famer. I think he eventually gets there. And quarterbacks usually go in. I am not fully convinced though that with the ballot system and the way it's done, that he'll go in like first ballot. I don't know, maybe. They got to change stuff with that. He should be. I think the second half of his career in Los Angeles has solidified him as a Hall of Famer. Him winning MVP was very much deserved. He and Drake May were the 2 best quarterbacks in the league. I leaned toward Matthew Stafford, toward being the best quarterback in the NFL this year. I thought that he made fewer mistakes, took fewer sacks, just was so incredibly accurate and in command. And he played, the coolest thing about Matthew Stafford is that he was a pure pocket quarterback. And that was not Stafford. When I first started covering the Vikings in 2016, he had 2 games against the Vikings that he kind of threw. Well, let's see. They beat them. Oh, he had that amazing throw to Andre Roberts. They beat them in that game. And then they beat them on Thanksgiving Day where Sam Bradford threw the ball right to them. And then 17 is what I'm thinking of, where Stafford kind of had that 14-7 win. And then in the second game is Thanksgiving, kind of throws that away. I think has a late interception. And then he had that game where he was sacked 10 times. He was kind of a wild man, where he had some of the best throws I've ever seen and some of the worst mistakes. And he has eliminated the bad play. And this guy just sits there and picks apart defenses. He was brilliant this year, totally deserving. I know there was the controversy with Sam Monson, who is a good friend of mine and has been on the show many times. And I understood where Sam was coming from. That would not have been my thought process for an MVP award of Justin Herbert raising the level of his team. For me, it's most valuable player. Which player created the most value? So which play, I mean, we have a stat for that, which is expected points added. The Rams were number 1 in that in passing. To me, that does it. Like, who is the most valuable player? Matthew Stafford's passing was the most valuable thing in the NFL this year. I would have gone with him. And Herbert's performance was just okay. If Herbert under those circumstances had put it close, then I would get it. But it was just okay. The Magic Man, if Mendoza is there at 18, do we take him? I think that Ryu Ken says KOC would do good with Mendoza. I actually very much agree with that. I think Mendoza would be a really good fit with KOC. I don't think he gets to number 2. In fact, let's see what let's take a look at what the odds are here. The NFL draft on FanDuel, minus 7,000 right now that Fernando Mendoza goes number 1 in the draft. It just doesn't seem very likely that he will go anywhere except number 1. So I would expect that there's no chance that they could get him. Now, I shouldn't say no chance because Will Levis was a projected top 5 quarterback and he ended up dropping into the second round, Shadur Sanders. So I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't say there's no chance. There's always a chance. But if you're the Raiders, it's your time. I mean, you tanked by accident and you're down like that. That's the accidental tank. The natural tank is what I've called it. The Raiders natural tanked and they need to draft Mendoza and go forward with him. Douglas says Jefferson's praise for Daniel Jones caught my attention. Daniel Jones is on the table. He is definitely on the table. We haven't talked as much about him, and partly because I feel like Daniel Jones becoming the Vikings quarterback next year has limitations to how far you could really go with that. But yeah, I mean, it's an option, and KOC clearly liked him a lot and seemed to stew over that a little bit. You know, it got brought up a few times and they talked about it at the press conference, what happened with not getting Daniel Jones back to Minnesota last year. Cause I think that we might've been telling a slightly different story. Wow. Think about that. Like that's a summer podcast of like, what would we have been talking about right now if Daniel Jones had beat out McCarthy and then won like 10 games, got to the playoffs and lost in the first round? Would we be saying, move on from Daniel Jones, go to McCarthy or what the heck, right? I don't know. But Jones is definitely on the table. There's no guarantee that he goes back to the Indianapolis Colts. Sam says Vikings are pulling a Jets on JJ McCarthy. Watch him be on some other team 3 years from now turning around would be classic Vikings. Would it be classic Vikings? Is there other quarterbacks that they've drafted that turned it around elsewhere? Or do you just mean like everything goes wrong for your team? Because I mean, that's not really true. The Vikings, when they've had quarterbacks that were young that they thought were going to work out, it's not like they went somewhere else and crushed it. Teddy's a totally different story. The fact that he ever played again and had, a 500 season with Denver, won 5 games with New Orleans was amazing because he probably shouldn't have ever played football again, but he didn't go kill it somewhere else. And Christian Ponder's career was over pretty quickly. Dante struggled elsewhere, also injury related. Can't remember any, other than like Rich Gannon. Does that count when he was a backup, and then he shows up like way later? I think that it is a very strong possibility if the Vikings were to move on from JJ McCarthy after, say, this year or next year, that another team will pick him up and they will try to develop him over a couple of years and see if there's something there. Just like with Trey Lance and maybe with Anthony Richardson and just like Zach Wilson, like a guy like this will stick around in the league and people will give him chances if the Vikings move on from him. The odds aren't great that he's going to show them, but guys like him have. Tannehill's the example. But if you were the Miami Dolphins, if you're the Miami Dolphins and you had Ryan Tannehill and you let him go to the Titans and he was pretty good with the Titans, are you looking at yourself going, how did we do that? Based on his performance, how could you stick with him forever until he got right? And how many examples truly are there? So Darnold is a good one. And, Geno kinda is a second round draft pick, I think, right? Was he second round? How many examples are there of guys really finding it somewhere else? I guess you could say Baker, but I would argue that he was good early on in Cleveland. It doesn't happen that often. It's mostly outliers. The Magic Man says, I swear some of you still want Ponder zipping it out there out of fear he might go to another team and be good. That's funny. That's funny. Yeah. Look, if they decide that it's over with JJ McCarthy, that means their evaluation behind the scenes has been so poor that they're pretty comfortable moving on. Because otherwise, they would stick with it if they believed in it. Druder says no on Mac Jones. That's totally fine. It's totally fine if you don't want Mac Jones. I see Mac as somebody who could definitely game manage his way with Brian Flores and a run game. Like if they decided, all right, Frank Smith, you're here. They've elevated Keith Carter, outside zone run guy. We're running the ball. KOC done changed. We're now turning it into the Vrabel Tennessee offense, drafting Jeremiah, trading up in the draft for Jeremiah Love. They're going full run on this thing. Then Mac Jones could probably win you 10, 11 games with the defense. Can he go much farther than that? Probably not. This guy has won 10 games before in the league and went to the playoffs as a rookie. So it's not like he's completely talentless. It's just, is that really getting you ahead? I don't see it that way, but he could game manage you to a decent amount of wins. Go Bling Graphics or whatever it is. I'm sorry. Gobbling? Is that what it is? Goblin? Oh, Goblin Graphics. I try to get these right. I take it that he meant he would demand a trade. Are you talking about Jefferson? Kirk it is. When it comes to Jefferson, I think that this year he is going to be the same Justin Jefferson, thick or thin. But he's not going to be punked by his organization. And look, he's under contract and you can't just, okay, we're going to trade him. But there is levels of someone becomes so unhappy and then the offers would be so high. And you are at a position in your roster building that after this, it would even make sense to trade him for 2 first-round draft picks or whatever it would come along with it. And when you're talking about like the way his contract is set up, it starts to become very expensive eventually. And that's when you set these contracts up for reworking them or signing an extension. And if he says no extension, not going to happen, not going to rework my deal with you guys, either trade me or whatever, then you would probably have to do it. So that's why 2026 is so big for Justin Jefferson. I'm not trying to put words in his mouth and say that's what he's going to do, but it's got to be in the back of his mind. You could tell on those Radio Row interviews how much it's digging at him that people are like, are you still the best receiver? He's smiling, but I'm sure he wants to fight them. Hunter, with the salary cap being well over $40 million, who would be your top 3 cap casualties. So they're going to do a lot of stuff. That's why on overthecap.com, I think there's like a true dollar figure of what you can restructure. So they've got enough to restructure and not have to just lop off major pieces. But the guys that are most likely to not be here based on their salary, there are 2 of them. And I'll have to think if there's a third. Aaron Jones is clearly number 1. Oh, okay, here's your 3. Ryan Kelly, obviously, should not play football again. And then Javon Hargrave. So those would be your 3 guys that they're probably moving on from. But you can extend Brian O'Neill, and there's quite a few guys that you can restructure contracts or sign an extension for Jonathan Grenard, or I mean, there's movement all over this roster to make enough salary cap space that if they need to sign somebody, that if they need to make a trade, they'll be able to do it. Those wheels are just going to have to start turning soon. And normally that happens after the combine. So you go to the combine, Rob Brzezinski's going to sit there and meet with every agent for every player, and they're going to work things out of, all right, we're going to restructure your deal. We're going to redo this, or can we get an extension done so we can have more cap space, etc. They'll get there. I'm very, well, of course they'll be cap compliant. No one's ever not been cap compliant, but I think they'll get there to the point where they can also make additions. SWAT says, I would give up Grenard for Malik Willis and a second round pick. Luckily for you, Malik Willis is a free agent, so you don't have to give up anything for Malik Willis. But that's a lot. That'd be a ton to give up for a guy who is not proven. The bigger question is, what would you offer him for a dollar figure? I would go, let's see, 2 for 30, 2 for 40, maybe, with a lot of it into the second year. So he has a lower salary cap this year and then another one. Although I think it might be even better if you went 1 year deal, 15 mil guaranteed. And you said to him this, look, 15 mil is already life-changing money. Okay. So if you go sign a 2-year contract with Miami for 2 years for 50 and you don't play well, do you think you're getting 50? You're probably getting more like 15 or 20 million anyway. Leave a couple mil on the table to come here and play with Jefferson. And then if it works out for you on a 1-year bet on yourself deal, then you get 100 mil. That's my pitch to Malik Willis. I think it's a good one. Jim says the Wilfs are happy with being the middle of the pack and relevant. So I don't think that that's quite it, because if that was true, then they wouldn't have fired coaches after they were 9-7 or 8-9, which they have in the past. I think what it is they can't stand the idea of not being in the conversation or in the race for a single year. And that's where you come up with competitive rebuild is the best idea. Because, okay, well, we're going to have to reset this roster, but they hold to a certain standard of being in the playoffs that you have to continue to try to chase. And those two things in a league where all the rules are built to help the teams that stink, sometimes they don't just add up. And gosh, go through the years of first round top 10 draft picks who could have changed your franchise in some way that you miss out on because you never take that step back. Or quarterbacks like, hey, I know Justin Herbert, one person voted him for MVP or whatever, but I mean, if the Vikings had taken a step back, do you get Justin Herbert? Like, I don't know. Well, that would have been 19 into the 20 draft, so I guess not. But they could have taken Jordan Love or Jalen Hurts. Didn't do that either. So they didn't even take swings. That's another thing too. They haven't even really taken swings at quarterbacks. They've always waited till they needed one to draft one, which you're not supposed to necessarily do. 2024 is a good draft class to do it in, but they haven't, like Lamar Jackson's there on the board. And I know that drafting him would have seemed crazy because they had just signed Kirk, but Atlanta did it. And I still think it was the right decision. And then they could have developed him behind the scenes. I know Mike would have hated Lamar. I think Lamar is undeniable, but even like a Jalen Hurts, they took a shot at a third round Kellen Mond, but didn't want to draft, Jalen Hurts. They haven't even really taken shots when they had Kirk other than Kellen Mond, and that's it. Jaron Hall, like 5th round player. I mean, they've just never really, they're committed to the things that have worked for other franchises more consistently than hang around in the middle and then hope one of the years it clicks. And I don't know if they got that sense from some teams that worked for in the early 2000s when they were just coming into the league. Maybe they did. Dan, Mac Jones is not exhilarating. Kerpluppy says, only way I'm getting rid of Grenard is for Burrow or Herbert. I totally agree with that. I just don't think that they should move a guy of that talent. And he's also a captain on the team. He's important for the leadership. They do need to figure out the rotation with Dallas Turner, though, because I want to see more of this Dallas Turner. Josh says, we have a good locker room. No one cares when a playoff game. Yes, I don't disagree with you there. But if you think that part 1 has nothing to do with part 2 or sustainability and having a good locker room, I think that it does help. And when you look at, some of the successful coaches, Mike Vrabel is a locker room master. Sean McVay, great culture coach. I mean, these things do matter. They're certainly not everything. Usually quarterback is everything, but they do matter for sustainability from year to year. Like usually the wheels don't completely come off. Like with this year, they were able to kind of dig deep, hit the easier part of their schedule, take care of business, not embarrass themselves with this season, that kind of thing. I think that it is a big deal with Kevin O'Connell, especially when things are going well, of having everybody pull in the same direction. And then when things are not going well, that it doesn't entirely collapse and the wheels don't fully come off. Now, you could argue that maybe they need the wheels to come off at some point. Douglas says, for the next draft sim, can you start by trading the 1st round pick for Kyler just to watch the chat meltdown? That's always the thing about the Kyler deal, is every time I bring it up, I need a sign. Maybe I'll make one. I think I have a whiteboard around here somewhere. I'll just hold it up. It says, not in a trade, not trading for that contract, only for $1.2 million, the veteran minimum. And when you put it that way, a quarterback of that much talent for basically nothing for the price of a special teamer, well, the bang for buck is there. The potential upside is there. And I'll give you a little preview. Should I give you the tease? So next week, I'm going to have a couple episodes that are checking in with NFC North podcasters, reporters, and just, hey, what's your offseason, thoughts? And I asked one of them, what's the thing that your team would not want the Vikings to do? And the answer was get Kyler Murray, because he might turn into Sam Darnold. So from another team's perspective, you wouldn't want the Vikings having a chance to turn around somebody good. But yes, you're funny. I think I want to have different themed draft sims. The theme of this draft sim that I did the other night, where I took a defensive tackle, running back, center, was, hey, if the coaches are really running this thing, who would coaches want? And that was what I came up with. They're going to want these immediate needs filled, and they're going to want more safer players. By the way, the other night, I know I haven't seen Steve here tonight. Steven was just killing me about Christian Miller from Georgia. And I did watch a breakdown of Christian Miller from Rand Carthon on CBS Sports, who's a former NFL GM. And he talked very highly of the Georgia player. So I'm just saying, I didn't think it was a crazy pick. I was hoping to bring that up with Steven, who was very, very unhappy with that selection. But, but a defensive tackle who's a really good run stuffer with some potential to grow into pass rush is a safe draft pick. That's how I approached it. I think in the next one, I might go receiver, or I might go, hey, what if they traded up? We got a lot of time to draft sim. A lot of time. or BACHA 80 says competition is fine, but to write off JJ as a 22-year-old is ridiculous. Is it ridiculous to think that they cannot go into 2026 relying on JJ McCarthy because of his performance? I don't think it is. I don't think that's ridiculous at all. And when you look again historically, and I know life's not fair, but a lot of quarterbacks by 23 or 24 years old, 2 or 3 years in the NFL, a lot of quarterbacks have already been shuffled in and out. Again, is it fair? Is it perfect? Would you prefer to say, hey, KOC, you have 7 years to work with JJ McCarthy and eventually he'll be good? Okay, that would be great. You just can't do that. The NFL just doesn't work that way. And when somebody needs to develop in these particular areas and doesn't have freakish athletic skill, that's where it becomes really hard. He's got good athletic skill, but not like Drake May, not like 6'4" crazy arm that can throw out of any angle or something like that. And it's just good. It's not Josh Allen. Then it's even harder to stay with that person because their athleticism isn't getting you wins. Where somebody like Josh Allen, his athleticism was winning games for Buffalo even when he wasn't throwing the ball well. So they could look at it and say, well, we can win and develop him. I don't know that you can win and develop JJ McCarthy. He went sort of 6-4, more like, half a game and half a game against a team not trying. It was more like 4.5-4. And how many games were good? Probably 2 of them. Out of the 10 that he played, I would say 2 were legitimately good. Detroit and Washington was a good game, but just nothing happened. They were winning the whole time. And Dallas was a very good game. You're going to bank your future on that? No, of course. Yeah, competition is something that you definitely have to have, but I think even just a different starter and make him really prove it. Jay says, watch Up and Adam podcast. She interviewed Jones and Jefferson, Kay Adams, I assume you mean. And I think they're both not sold on JJ. There was no, from Jefferson and from Jones, there was no defensiveness whatsoever. Just like with Kevin O'Connell, it was like, it was bad. That's where when people are like the last 4 games, if you look at it's like, guys, even the players they're not even going to gaslight you and pretend this was a good season. Or that there's even that great of a reason to believe that it's headed in a direction where he takes command of the franchise. And it's not fair, but that's just how it works. If he needed to show a lot more, and he also needed to show a lot more from a leadership perspective. Just high-fiving people coming off the field is not how you lead a team in the NFL. And making nicknames for yourself and yelling in the locker room and stuff, that's not it. It's execution. That's how you lead. Oh yeah, Grenard had that tweet as well. Yeah. Just hope that McCarthy is living in internetless cave somewhere, Kerpuppy. I do feel bad because there are many, my wife is always asking me, she's doing the Olympics, by the way, curling. If you guys get a chance to see any curling, it's on Peacock. But she will ask me about players. She is fascinated by players who don't work out. Fascinated by them. Like, why did this guy go bust? What happened with Lewis Seen? What happened with Andrew Booth Jr.? What happened? There's 100 of them over the years of like, what happened with Laquan Treadwell? What happened with ever? And I've always said, it's not that interesting because that happens most of the time. Most of the people that get drafted don't work out. Most of the quarterbacks that get drafted don't work out. And it's always for different reasons. It's with JJ McCarthy so far. And I think that every time I'm going to throw this in there, like it's not over and that he's got the talent to do it, but he's just a really long way away from what I see. But that's what it comes down to, is a lot of it is just bad luck and circumstance for JJ McCarthy. Because if he had been drafted by the New York Giants, for example, let's just say instead of Malik Neighbors, they pick JJ McCarthy. If they pick McCarthy and they play him right away with Brian Dable, he might actually have some fit with Brian Dable's offense of what he did with Jackson Dart, where he uses athleticism a lot, where what he did with Josh Allen. They're also a team with no expectation whatsoever. He could have played the whole season if he could stay healthy. Just that, imagine a different world where that happens, where he plays the whole year for a bad team, develops, learns a lot, stays fully healthy, and grows a ton. And by year 2, he is ready to take over, and then they draft their receiver, and then all of a sudden, maybe the Giants feel pretty good about him. But that's not what happened. What happened is he got hurt, and it never really got back to the spot where it was development-wise in 2024, and then he got hurt again. And that 5-game section, I mean, that is a third of a season just gone. Poof. Couldn't even really get into a rhythm. And I mean, even the week 2 game, what did you take away from that? I mean, I don't know. If you have a second kid, get to practice. I mean, I don't really know. That was brought up so many times, and we don't need to go back to that controversy, but just, my point is with JJ McCarthy, I really do feel legitimately bad for him as a person from a personal perspective, because I think he does want it really bad. And I think that he did have very high standards for himself coming into the league, but I also could sense that pressure on him. And every time he'd talk about it not being there, it felt like more, oh yeah, it's really there with having to lead a team like that. And I don't think he was mentally or emotionally ready for that either. This is the most stressful sport because everybody is on edge every single week at their wits' end with how much they put into this. And everybody knows that the clock is ticking. The minute you go out there for your first game, the clock is ticking on your career. And so when you're out there holding the football, you're holding careers in your hands. And when they just won 14 games and Darnold was probably not going to completely collapse in Seattle. You know, they knew how good he was, and he goes out there and starts succeeding. I mean, that is just a lot. And then he gets in, has some immediate success in Chicago, and then it goes away by getting hurt. When is it supposed to happen is the very hard part about this. I don't think that all of you who believed in the McCarthy of the quarterback that was supposed to come in and be this franchise guy that you had waited for forever, I don't think you're all fools. I think that there were plenty of signs that could have been the case, and I talked about them. Even in training camp, there were signs that still could have been the case. But that week 2 injury, I mean, the first one is really devastating, but the week 2 one is also devastating because, okay, and I remember this after Atlanta. Some fans were upset with me for how hard I was on McCarthy. He was horrendous in that game. And I still said after the game, I think they'll win 11 games and McCarthy will come back and he'll be okay next week against Cincinnati and they'll get a win and he'll get on a roll. And it never got to happen. And then they go overseas for 2 weeks. I mean, just think about this is just apocalyptic stuff adding up on this guy. Because if they didn't go overseas for a couple weeks, take him with him, at least I think there was some issues with swelling, he said, right? Yeah, he did. He said that there were issues with swelling when he went on the flights, and that may have set him back even farther. Like, oh my gosh. And then he finally gets into a little bit of a rhythm at the end of the season and hurts his hand. I mean, and then you have all these guys who are absolute ballers with Pro Bowls and All Pros and playoff games and all this stuff who are going to Radio Row and just being like, JJ, I don't know her. That's a meme. That's not a sexist joke. That's a meme. It's Mariah Carey. She says, I don't know her. Just making that clear. But they acted like, yeah, JJ, that was bad, huh? I mean, that's pretty tough. That's pretty tough. And then your head coach won't commit to you. Man, the expectations for him coming in right away were just so high that it was always going to be really hard to meet it. And in order to meet it, he would have had to have been healthy, and he also would have had to have been more emotionally ready for it, I think. Because that was the thing I talked about when Caleb Williams came into the league that we finally saw this year, but Caleb Williams was not ready for it either. I mean, he was a total emotional roller coaster that first year. Didn't know how to handle it. And a lot of guys don't. Jay says, do you think Rob Brzezinski is our next 2026 GM if the 2026 draft and free agency goes well? Well, they're not going to know how well it goes. I mean, if do you mean, well, functionally, like how it goes behind the scenes, I don't know if you're judging Rob Brzezinski and his GM resume based on just this. Now, you are going to ask, I'm sure, if he wants to be in that position, you're going to ask everyone, how did you think it went if you're the Wilfs? So that it could be a factor. Yeah. But they're really familiar with Rob Brzezinski. I mean, this is not a guy that you're learning about, some noob on the job that you're like, how is he handling a meeting? Like, this guy's handled 100 meetings. It's not something that's totally fresh to anybody. I think what they need to decide is, do they want him to be their guy, their liaison to what's going on there, sort of the made man who they're not going to get rid of ever, and like, you're the guy to lead these decisions into the future, whether you stick with KOC, etc. Or do they want someone else to be that person? I want the next GM to be very powerful. I don't want the next GM to be like, oh, let me hold your hand and make you happy, and let me try to make you happy, and let me feel like every scout has had their say, and let me feel like, the coaches get what they want and so forth. I would much rather have it be, this dude is the dude. This is the guy who is in freaking charge, and you all answer to him. And if this thing goes to hell, then it's his fault. I mean, as much as Brandon Beane looks ridiculous for firing Sean McDermott the way that he did, what I do respect about that situation is that nobody questions who is in charge of their franchise. It's their GM. And I think the same thing goes for, ask me about Philadelphia. Who is in charge? It is Howie Roseman. And Nick Sirianni is there, and he is, I think, a better coach than he gets credit for sometimes, though he should have fired his OC last year. He's clearly very dependent on the OC. But no one's questioning who's the man running the operation there. And I think it needs to be that way for the Vikings. If that's Rob, then that's Rob. But if it continues to be this, let's make sure everyone agrees on stuff, it's football. I just don't know how you do that. Aaron Rodgers sucked his first 2 seasons. Why do we do that? Why is that like a brain thing? Is that like what causes people when you try to make comparisons or when you try to make an argument to go to the most ridiculous place possible? Like what is it that causes that? In Aaron Rodgers' second season as a starter in the NFL, he threw 30 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, and had a, 103.2 quarterback rating. And then he went to the Super Bowl and won the next year. I mean, what? I actually cannot think of a worse person to compare JJ McCarthy to than Aaron Rodgers. I just can't. Like, talk about the all-time touch throwing accurate master. I mean, if you were to say who are the most accurate quarterbacks of all time, you'd get to Aaron Rodgers really, really fast. Like Joe Montana, Rodgers. It's like, what is it that Josh Allen did? Like, what are we doing here? The history is clearly against JJ McCarthy. It just is. If he goes into this year with any chance and can make something happen and develop, then you might have next year a quarterback who is reasonable enough to get you some wins and get into the playoffs if he takes a big step forward. But if you're talking about, well, hey, the best quarterback, this happened to him. Yeah, but that guy's insanely better. Like, I just don't, like, in the right places. And also, as much as Rodgers and his own personal philosophy may be very bizarre to me, he's also a genius when it comes to football. So I don't know. Yeah, we should make comparisons that make sense. We should stick with comparisons of, this is the hard part because they're hard to find. Like, hey, Bryce Young. If Bryce Young was on, the Panthers were not a good team this year. They were not. They're they were a below average team that made the playoffs because their conference is ridiculous, or their division is ridiculous. If Bryce Young is on the Vikings that won 9 games with terrible quarterback play, well, then maybe, you're talking about a playoff team. Probably are, right? comparisons like that of guys who really, really struggled early. Rodgers never really struggled and got a lot of time behind the scenes. Again, here we are with that discussion of a guy who had time to actually develop like Aaron Rodgers did. There's a reason it keeps working out for those freaking Packers. Reminder about the FanDuel question of the day. If you're just joining, big crowd here on a Friday night, just talking football. Appreciate all you guys. FanDuel question of the day is the over-under for the Super Bowl, 45.5. What is your score prediction? Mine is 24-17 Seahawks. But I usually get these things wrong. Let's see. Phenom says all bets are off means the Vikings are betting the farm on JJ. I think it means the exact opposite. I'm sorry. I think it means the exact opposite. Oh, man. Zed31 says, how can you beat teams in the draft that tank? No chance. This is a great point. How can you beat teams in the draft if you're the Vikings, if you have 8 top 100 draft selections since 2022? I looked this up. You're not going to be shocked by this. I looked this up. The Seattle Seahawks, they've been amazing at drafting. They didn't tank. 2 top 10 draft picks. And I believe it was 14 in the top 100. And 9 of those are in the top 40. What a genius. What a genius. Now they've had a very high hit rate. And they've done a great job at getting players that fit for them and that work for them. But John Schneider, the same GM, drafted Jordan Brooks and who was the running back? Rashad Penny, who never stayed healthy with a first-round draft pick. Same GM. Gave him a ton of picks, gave him a bunch of top 10s, and all of a sudden, or at least 2 top 10s, and I think it was 4 in the top 16. And all of a sudden, he looks smarter. You're going to have to, that is a longer-term philosophy for this team, but if you really want to hit in the draft, you have to have the picks. Let's see. Aaron says, whose decision was it to send McCarthy overseas when he was hurt? That's a good question. Can't understand. What I think, so here's what I think. This is a guess. I believe that they thought he might be able to play against the Browns. They thought where he was with that ankle injury, he might be able to play against the Browns. And then I believe that's where there was additional swelling. He wasn't able to practice. And then there was something about a wet field. I don't know. But I think that's what happened. Jason, people that are skeptical of McCarthy being called haters. Yeah, it's always going to happen though, Jason. Always. With any quarterback who's drafted, there's always going to be people that sort of latch onto the leg of reality and get dragged out eventually. Go look at the reaction to Justin Fields. I remember when Courtney Cronin reported that they would be lucky to get like a 3rd-round pick as a trade, and Bears fans crushed her for that. Justin Fields is a great quarterback. He showed so much progress, everything. They latched on to the few good games and ignored all the bigger sample, all the numbers, and attacked her nonstop. And then as soon as they got Caleb Williams, they were like, Justin who? And I think the same thing goes for McCarthy, that if you are realistic at all, and you're looking at any of the things that have been said, ignore even the stats. Look at any of the things that have been said. Find me a single quote that looks like, man, they're going back to him and they really like where they're at. If I would have a completely different tune if they were that way. If KOC had come out at the end of the year and said, look, I know it was a hard year, but JJ McCarthy's my guy and we're going down with the ship. Then I'd be like, all right, well, here we go. This is interesting. That's like Drake May didn't play very well in his first year, and they got there and they were like, what? We're getting Josh Dobbs as our backup. Drake May is our guy. We don't care. There was no question. There was no debate. There was no, hey, maybe we'll talk to Aaron Rodgers. Even the fact that they were doing that last year showed you, and this is why the decision looks so bad to let Darnold go, is that the fact that they were even having the phone call with Rodgers, that they were wanting badly, apparently, Daniel Jones to come back, says that they weren't all in on that. And it says that they had questions and they ignored those questions to let Darnold go. And I think that comes down to those last two games and the price tag. And the price tag for the franchise tag is they were very committed to spending all the money in free agency. Better numbers than Shadur Sanders. Well, I guess that's true. Yes, it is Josh Dobbs. Yeah, Josh Dobbs' revenge game. Sort of. Oh, I didn't think of that, though. That's Viking starting quarterback versus Viking starting quarterback. Josh Dobbs versus Sam Darnold. Maverick, Darnold should have been re-signed and made QB1. Well, usually when you win 14 games and you perform at that level and your offense with no running game is 9th in scoring, usually that quarterback doesn't leave the building. Usually you extend that quarterback and you would just have JJ as your backup. And I know that it would have been difficult from a fan pressure perspective, but usually that's what happens. This was a little bit of a different thing. Hunter says play calling has to change. 3-second play calls. I'm not sure the rest of that, but yeah, the play calling thing is just, I think, one of the most frustrating conversations, because the play calling, and especially opening scripts and things like that, for certain people, for certain quarterbacks, worked really well. And for certain quarterbacks, it didn't. But I think that if you look at the like 3rd and short stuff, 4th and short stuff, you say you've got to figure that out. There are areas where you have to figure out of the play calling. And when you get into the red zone on 2nd down and 1 and Jordan Mason's your running back, you just give it to him. Like, don't overcomplicate this with Carson Wentz as your quarterback. And that's what so much of it comes down to, is that when KOC has had a quarterback, he's always going to trust his quarterback no matter who it is. And there are times where you're like, but don't. But don't trust that guy. Don't trust Carson Wentz here. There's a moment in the Steelers game where they could win the game. They're running the ball successfully, and then it's like, here comes another drop back pass. He throws a pick or he fumbles or something, and it's like, why did you trust Carson Wentz? Why did you trust JJ McCarthy? And if that's the case, though, think about like what we're saying. If that's one of the main criticisms of his play calling, well, then it's really just not having the quarterback. But I think that you could have squeezed out some more wins in 2023 and this year. But what does that really mean, even if you did? Probably not a lot. Douglas, Kevin Williams, Adrian Peterson, and McKinney were all top 10 picks and building blocks for the 09 team. It is the truth, my friend. And they had to let a pick go to get Kevin Williams. But this franchise has fallen into some amazing players. Daniil Hunter, Everson Griffin. These are all pro caliber football players. Stephon Diggs, 5th round pick. Even Jefferson going where he did, considering some of the, CeeDee Lamb was picked up, but Jalen Reagor, oh my gosh, right? What? That is as lucky as it gets. If you ever need to know about draft luck, consider the Vikings have Justin Jefferson when Jalen Reagor was taken ahead of him. That's insane. And, Darrisaw, they trade down and they still get Christian Darrisaw. That's an elite talent that never would have thought you could get there. But most of the time, historically, if you're going to talk about odds, what are the best odds that someone becomes a Hall of Fame caliber player, all pro? It's drafting high. And even, Bryant McKinney's a great example because he was a frustrating player at times, but the guy was still unbelievable. He was still really, really good. Bacha 80, who's offended by tanking? Show of hands, I have zero issue. Well, I really like the movie F1. I enjoyed it. I watched it on a plane. And at one point, Brad Pitt says, sometimes you got to lose to win. And that is very true in sports sometimes. The Minnesota Timberwolves are pretty darn exciting. And one of the reasons is maybe the main 98% of the reason is Anthony Edwards, which, where did they get him? When were the last time they were that relevant? Kevin Garnett, where did they get him? You could be super smart. And I know, and again, the Seattle Seahawks never tanked, but they did have multiple top 10 draft picks that helped build this team. They have an offensive tackle who's a top 10 draft pick. I mean, it helps. It really helps to build elite talent around. And I think that that was one of the thoughts about Dallas Turner, was they may have had him as a top 10 prospect and thought, oh, this is our chance. But that's the problem when you're always drafting in those areas, is you have to then do something drastic to get that guy. So, I mean, I'm not advocating that the Vikings next year take it all apart, go all the way to the bottom in 2026 and just tank and lose and whatever. It's just that when the football, I don't know what, call it the football gods, when they decide it's your time, you have to say, you got me. It's my time. We need to set back. We need to rebuild, as opposed to kicking and screaming to 7 wins. That's the difference. And if you're not going to do that, then you need to have a lot of picks. If you're not going to do that, then you have to let guys go and sign elsewhere and get comp picks. I think that there was a year, I was looking this up recently, there was a year during the rebuild for the Lions when they fully tanked that they had 5 comp picks. That's just crazy. But 5 extra. The Vikings drafted 5 times this last year. They got 5 extra picks. Here we go. You have to be willing to maybe trade down at times, but also maybe trade players at times. You gotta stack picks if you're not going to draft that high. They've done none of it. It's just always win tomorrow. There is no tomorrow. So that's going to be our approach. That's why my favorite offseason for them was 2023. Where they actually said, we're going to be realistic. But the problem was they kept a good quarterback in Kirk, who got him enough wins to then not be realistic and not get May and not get Daniels and not get Williams. And here we are. Dan, say what you want. I would rather have a win against Washington and lose Peterson to an ACL than Andrew Luck. Yeah, I know. Everyone knows it's built this way. There's just some sort of like macho thing that people get all offended by. No one is ever saying that they should just throw games. It's be realistic as a front office. Be realistic. Are winning 5 meaningless games after you've been eliminated? I'm not sure what you're talking about, but the end of the season I thought was evidence of like how much the team still, cared. But at the same time, like I know Murph was talking about this last night at the roundtable, that he gave O'Connell a lot of credit. And I think you have to. If the team hates its head coach, they're going to not get you, those wins at the end. But also look at these players. These players weren't going to let that happen. Harrison Smith's out there. They're not, Aaron Jones, like they're not going to let that happen. These are guys who they know that they're highly paid to go out there and be pro football players on Christmas Day and go win a football game. So, that might be a little bit too much credit going to the coach and the culture and maybe just the players that they put in there. Your culture is usually only as good as the players you have. V-Storm says, please stop going back to the X. We know what Kirk is, and we're not going to do anything better than McCarthy or getting bounced in the wild card round. Yeah, I agree with that. Yep, I agree with that. If they go back to Cousins, we know exactly what's going to happen. And in this division, and with his current state of physical talent, when he was a much better quarterback, they had a 7-win season. The defense was horrible, but still, it's not like, Atlanta's defense was decent and they still won 8 games. This division, I just don't know how you can be a serious contender with a quarterback who was good several years ago and is still not the same guy post Achilles. Jason, if Joe Burrow is available, they need to go all in on him. He's still pretty young. So what would we give up for Joe Burrow? That's really the question. Is since we're, 2.5 hours into the conversation, let me grab a drink here. I've been trying to drink more water. What would it cost to what do you even approach them with? I mean, the fake trade that I came up with Troy Chapman, who runs, well, he works for overthecap.com. He has a Substack also that does salary cap stuff. I think the trade we came up with was Jonathan Grenard and 2 firsts, or maybe it was 3. It might have been 3. That feels like a lot, but it's also not the craziest thing I've ever heard in my life because it's Joe Burrow. You still do run into, though, after this year, the same problem Cincinnati has, but you have Brian Flores, and Cincinnati does not have Brian Flores. And when Brian Flores got here, the Vikings defense was horrible, and they still were average. And if you have average in Joe Burrow and Justin Jefferson, you're going to be pretty darn good. I think three firsts and Grenard's not crazy. It's a lot, but it's also a top 5 quarterback, and those guys don't come available. And if he gets hurt, then so be it. Then you're really screwed for a long time. If he gets hurt and you don't get to take advantage of this year, then that's the risk that you took. It's the same thing with really the Rams going all in on Matthew Stafford, though. Stafford had an injury history. He got hurt a lot, and they gave it a shot. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But no one watched Joe Burrow play at the end of the year because who cares about Cincinnati? He was phenomenal. The times that I saw a little of Joe Burrow and then the numbers, he was phenomenal. I mean, it's still very, very much there when it comes to his talent. Norse Force, you're going to have to let it go when it comes to they don't know how to draft with Darren Nelson over Marcus Allen. You're going to have to move on from that one. They don't know how to draft. That's a long time ago. Anthony Barr turned out to be a good player for them. I understand he's not Aaron Donald, but they had Sharif Floyd at the time. They were supposed to know that a surgeon would botch the surgery for Sharif Floyd. That's not really that fair, is it? And they had Linval Joseph. They look great in the interior I know Aaron Donald turned out to be an all-time great player, but you could see why they had just spent a first-round pick on a defensive tackle who was good at the time, right? Am I timing that out correct? Wasn't it 2013 that they drafted Floyd? He made a good impression right away. So that's probably why they took Anthony Barr. Do I got that timing right? I think that's right. So you can understand that. Look, you can go both ways. How many teams passed on Randy Moss? Every team has this, right? The Dallas Cowboys could have taken Randy Moss. Imagine what that would have looked like for how many years. And they didn't, and that's, he lit them the hell up and that Thanksgiving. The Vikings have a lot of those. Other teams could have taken Adrian Peterson. There's plenty of guys that go look at that draft where they took Kevin Williams. Look at some of the guys they picked ahead of him. All those teams went, oh my gosh, we could have had Kevin Williams. You've got those two. SWAT says KOC needs to stop calling the offense and get a real offensive coordinator. Never going to happen. Never going to happen. But also, I mean, I don't know. Like, a lot of coaches do this. Shanahan, McVay, LaFleur, a lot of very, very good coaches call their offense. I don't think that that's an impediment. I did think that early for him. And I also thought it a little bit when Darnold was first here, that getting in the play call was taking too long, and that hurt them. And play calling is a funny thing because it's really a complete team thing. All the assistants, the O-line coach, the running back coach, they all work all day every Tuesday to put together the game plan. And then the head coach comes through, and in those meetings then makes the final call on what plays they're going to put on the play card. And then a play card, John Gruden did an awesome video on this if you ever want to watch it. What a play card looks like has all the situational stuff. Every situation you can think of is on the play card. So it's not like something happens and then the play caller is like, what to do? I mean, it's planned. It's there. So it isn't random when it comes to the play calling. I mean, that's going with their ideas going into a game. So it might be a little bit overrated of, well, if it's this guy calling, it's going to be this or that. I think that O'Connell has a lot to like about his play calling that gets ignored in the play calling discussion, mainly that at the end of games, they usually win. And that's a lot on him in the play calling. And so, there's so much focus on, as there always is with football and every sport, the negative. I mean, and sure, they haven't succeeded, so that's fine. I'm not criticizing anyone for it, but we got to tell the whole story. I mean, they have had a lot of great performances by quarterbacks at the end of games with open receivers, great execution, quarterbacks who are locked in. We saw it from Kirk right away. We saw it from Darnold. We even saw it from JJ McCarthy at the end of games, if they were in them. So his late game play calling has been phenomenal. And his first 15 was phenomenal that got them ahead in every game in 2024. I think that some of this situational stuff with kind of a common sense can be missed. But I don't blame him in the play calling for what happened with JJ McCarthy. That was a guy who was not ready to play in the NFL this year, not being able to throw the football accurately. That was the reason. You can make a bunch of excuses and you can say, oh, it's this, that, and the other thing. Those throws are there. There's data on how open the Vikings wide receivers were this year. Separation percentage. You look at the completion percentage over expected. It's awful. Look at the bad throw percentage. It's awful. He had the same bad throw percentage by Pro Football Reference as Nick Mullins. It's not starting caliber. I don't know. When you have 1 out of every 5 throws, and this is by the numbers, 1 out of every 5 throws is completely inaccurate. What play caller looks like a genius there? Rome, ROWM, I think there. How do you not pound the table for an experienced quarterback? KOC blew it by not having an option if Darnold and Jones walk. KOC and the front office, and that may have played into the whole situation. Now, I did try to go through and look at who would have also been around. It's not a lot of great quarterbacks who did awesome stuff this year. I will say that Wentz probably in those 5 games gave him just as good of a chance as anybody else. I mean, Flacco, had his moments this year, and it was fun to watch Flacco play. So maybe Flacco would have done better, but the state of quarterback play is so tough beyond the starters, and even with some of the starters, that Phillip freaking Rivers returned to the NFL and played. Jason says, my problem is he still turns the ball over and still makes boneheaded throws. Will he change? That is a major part of it, is decision-making. And that's where if you go into an offseason and you need to correct 1 or 2 things, okay, this is like 8 things. It's just a lot. It's decision-making with the football, which did get better toward the end of the season. It's mechanics and throwing consistently. It's command of the offense. It's ability to run the entire offense. It's chemistry with Justin Jefferson. It's a lot. TJ, why bring in Mason and not really utilize him? There were situations this year where I felt the same way. And that's where I think there could be a time next year where we find ourselves saying, the end of the year when they had 0 quarterback play from Max Brosmer and they had to just grind out something, or they were trying to dumb down the offense for JJ McCarthy. And so they were a run first team for a little bit of time there. Maybe they took something away from that you can sometimes just lean on Jordan Mason. I mean, Jeff says, can we stop with the trade Grenard thing? He's an elite pass rusher. I would say he is a second tier pass rusher. The guys who belong in the elite category would be Max Crosby, Myles Garrett. Like those guys are sort of in a world of their own. And then the second tier Pro Bowl caliber. So there's like the all pro, best of the best. That's elite to me. And then like second tier is Pro Bowl caliber, can get double-digit sacks. Yeah, I don't think you should send out a guy who could get double-digit sacks. And I think he will next year. Douglas, any chance Aaron comes back on Aaron Jones on a pay cut? You can still draft a running back in the top 100. That's possible. I'd like them to get someone more explosive, but you're right. They could draft one. If it's Aaron Jones, the concern that I would have about that is that they had a guy who was pretty explosive in Ty Chandler. And I know that he struggled to like learn the plays and stuff, but they just never wanted to get him in and give him the ball. And they just kept going with Aaron. It's almost like with Harrison Smith, how every year in the offseason they would say, you know what, we got to get Harrison a little bit more rest. And then they just would never do it and play him every play. Oh, well, okay. And the same thing kind of goes for this, where it's, yeah, well, we'll have a rotation with 3 guys and then we'll just never see the rookie because Aaron Jones is really smart and they could trust him. I would rather see, and Aaron Jones is one of my favorite players to cover, and he is someone who impacts everyone around him in a positive way. And that is hard to replace. But there are realities of he just doesn't have the explosiveness that he once had, as no running back does into their 30s, and you need explosive runs. I mean, his success rate wasn't bad, but you need explosive, game-changing runs sometimes. And if they get a rookie and then Jones knows the offense way better, they'll go with him and we won't see the other guy. And then it'll be like, why did you draft him? You know what I mean? You could sort of see that coming. Mama says all of our quarterback options suck. Yeah. But the thing I can't help but go back to is how often that's been the case in Vikings history and how often they've still found themselves in a position to be talking about the story of the year with the quarterback. And maybe what happens to a franchise in 1999 won't happen again, but it just keeps happening. So I always want to figure out like, hey, how can this work? That's always what I think about on the show, right? I tend to try to do this. When the team does something, I look at it from all angles and go, how can it work? What could take it apart? That's really what we do here on the show. And then we cover drama sometimes. But that's really what we do on the show. We talk about ideas. How could it work? What could take it apart? So last year, how could it work with JJ McCarthy? If he started out okay and then turned a corner, man, if he had turned a corner midseason against the Ravens and the Bears and then won the last 5 games, it would have looked amazing. That's how it could work. He would have to stay healthy. He would have to be very, very emotionally and mentally strong and mature. And he would have to command that room. And right, that's how it could work. But if it did, it would have been really good. What could take it apart? Inexperience, technical throwing issues, timing with the offense, injuries, imperfect things happening around that you couldn't predict, right? And it could have gone either way. The odds were probably leaning toward the second one based on how few quarterbacks come in right away and succeed when they haven't played a lot of college football, but we'll do the same thing with whatever quarterback they get. If it's Mac Jones, we'll talk about how it could work and what could take it apart. This isn't a flag planting show where we just decide this is the truth and stick on it forever. Everything is chances. The NFL is a big casino and it's a bunch of different games that you're all playing at once. And every single thing that happens has its own odds and its own potential to work or not. And that's what makes it so interesting. Let's see. Phenom. I'm enjoying the conversation. The voice is running a little low. It's been a lot of podcasting this week, but I've really liked it. You guys, I need to stop and compliment all of you in the comment section. Just done a great job of being civil with the discussion and asking great questions and making great comments all week long. And I kind of had a concern about that this week after the firing of Kwesi and like, how's this going to go? And can we have these live chats? Is it going to be civil? Is it going to be a good discussion? You guys have made it that. Reminder about that FanDuel question of the day. Score prediction for the Super Bowl. The over-under on FanDuel is 45.5. So if you've got some score predictions that you want to get in, throw them at me. But I mean, it's turning into an epic chat, but like, I'm good with that because we continue to have good discussion. Dan says, anyone remember the 98-yard bomb from Darnold to Jefferson? I think that is what bothers me probably the most about the decision to let Darnold go is, and the thing that maybe bothers is wrong. I'm bothered by poverty. Like, I'm not really bothered by anything with football. It's all interesting to me, but let's see what word would be the right thing. It sticks with me as something that's hard to get around when I think about the decision to go to McCarthy and move on from Darnold. The thing that's hard to get around is how freaking talented that guy is. His leadership and his approach, and I saw Harrison Smith had a great comment to Tyler Dunn about like just showing up and doing your job every day and not letting those things that go wrong, stick with you, and how Sam Darnold's done a great job with that. And that's wonderful. Look, Case Keenum was great as a guy, as a leader. The locker room loved him. He's a ton of fun as a player. But Case Keenum was was it undrafted, 7th round pick, whatever it would have been. I think it was undrafted. And he was small, and he didn't throw the ball very hard, and he had a lot of spunk, and he got a lot of things to go his way in 2017 that everybody knew wouldn't go his way if he played 50 games. But when you think about that throw, and the comment after that Sam Darnold sort of matter of fact said like, oh, good thing I didn't throw it as hard as I could because I would have overthrown him. The throw against Seattle, the play against Atlanta where he beats the blitz and runs around and throws a touchdown. The arm talent of a guy to put together a game like he did against Chicago, where he is just throwing anticipation laser beams that perfectly glide. And this is that documentary last night. I could have done a whole podcast. I was ready. It was like 2 a.m. and I was like, who wants to talk about this documentary about the 49ers? But one of the things I just couldn't help was Jerry Rice saying about Joe Montana, or maybe it was Bill Walsh, about why he drafted Joe Montana, was that he threw a very catchable football. And I was like, Sam Darnold threw a very catchable football. His talent was so obvious to watch. You didn't have to say, well, the guy's got a lot of heart, but he tries so hard and I'm rooting for him. It was like, look at it. Look at that throw. Look at that arm. My goodness. And look at the athleticism to make some of these plays. And one of the coolest things that Sam Darnold does is that he just will stand there and someone will be coming to kill him. And then he'll be like, yeah, and just turn his body and make a ridiculous throw. It's like, that was the part I couldn't get over, and I still kind of can't. Talent like that, pure talent like that, just does not walk through the door. Pure talent like that's probably not the 5th overall quarterback in a draft. It's usually a top 3 draft pick. You just don't get that. And then it fell in your lap for $10 million and then you let it walk. That was the hard part. It's like, how can you let talent like that go? Skill, actual skill. Well, you can get really pissed because he had a bad game against the Lions and a bad game against the Rams and say, we can't win with him. Got to get him out of here. You can't tell me if the season had ended. Let's say that after week 16, let's say something happened where the NFL had to shut down and they could not play any more games and they had to end the season. There was a player strike, 94 baseball, and the Vikings went 14-2 with Sam Darnold. His last game is beating the Packers. There is no way that he's not the Vikings quarterback going forward. There's just not. And to judge it on 2 games where his offensive line didn't hold up, the red zone play calling, they couldn't run the ball in, the defense gets beat. It just still kind of boggles my mind that someone with that much skill and that much success that you could say, no, we got something better. It's hard to find somebody who could throw it like that. Only Sam Bradford, and guess where he was drafted? Rich says, our fan base is weird. We want the best when we have no options for the best quarterback. Ask the room which available QB KOC is going to get. That's even going to get us close to the Super Bowl. That is the struggle, my friend. That is the struggle, is when you start adding up which quarterback who's available can get them to the Super Bowl. It's hard to come to any as your conclusion that are not named Joe Burrow, because Joe Burrow could get you to the Super Bowl, but Kyler Murray, Geno Smith, Mac Jones, Kirk Cousins, Aaron Rodgers, Malik Willis even seems like a stretch. I really like some things about Willis, but seems like a pretty big stretch that he could come in as a guy who's never started a full season and do it. That is where when Vikings fans do sort of lash out about, KOC or the ownership or whatever, I get it, because now you're having to put the eggs in the basket of kind of hoping that they get someone else to squeeze every ounce out of that orange and then be put in a position to have to pay someone or have it totally blow up. And neither one of those things sound like really truly competing. And that is the hell that you live in if you draft the wrong quarterback. And I also understand that this is why a lot of people come in and say, dude, why don't we just stick with McCarthy? Because what difference does it make if you go 9-8 when it comes to playing Kirk Cousins or playing Aaron Rodgers? And I get that logic. And in the right world, I would agree with it, but I just don't think you can risk that with Jefferson and his future. And I don't think you can risk wasting a very good roster that with good quarterback play, this would be the other side of the argument that CJ Stroud and Bo Nix had legitimate chances to play for a Super Bowl this year. And you already elevated Sam Darnold to the point of winning 14 games. So you need to do it again, but it's not like you can't. It's not like you haven't elevated two quarterbacks whose reputations was they can't really do it when it comes to Kirk and Sam Darnold. So you can. Trade Addison or Grenard for Mac Jones. Yeah, I'm definitely not Grenard. I mean, I don't know why we're even bringing up Grenard. Addison is a different story. But if you're trading Addison, then you'd want to get something back. You suggested a pick swap. I don't think Mac Jones is that valuable. I think what you're looking for is probably like a second round pick or something. If you were trading Jordan Addison, you're getting Mac Jones and maybe a third, probably looking at something like that. Maybe I'm giving too much credit to Addison, but we're talking about a legit wide receiver 2 here, even with some troubles. But they got public transportation. They got those self-driving cars in San Francisco. So you can just take those. That was the first time I ever saw them. Not for me. I wouldn't, I like somebody behind the wheel, but I saw them in 2019 in San Jose, I think, the self-driving car. So that could help Jordan Addison in San Francisco, or actually Santa Clara. There's also nothing around either. That also could help. But I think Addison is still valuable. I don't think he's lost all of his value because of his recent issue. And Mac Jones, to me, is not that valuable. He's a backup quarterback. If San Francisco keeps him, which is fine, but I mean, he's your life preserver, but I don't think that he's something you really need when you have your franchise quarterback. I don't think that it should cost that much. Maybe if San Francisco holds out and there's a bunch of other teams offering for Mac Jones, I also don't think that either. I also don't think that there's a bunch of teams that are going to be vying for Mac Jones. It's sort of made to be that way because of the quarterback landscape. But I mean, there was last year a lot of quarterback movement and he ended up as a backup. Steven says, why do they say all bets are off why can't all bets be on? I mean, that is the phrase. That's a good question. Cause you're right. All bets really are on. All bets are, hey, they might make a bet on anything. That's good. That's a very fair point. But the source told Kevin Seifert that all the bets were off, which does make it sound like all bets for any other quarterback are off. Like, hey, all bets are off. They're not, but that's not how it's used. That's a great point. What a mystery, our language. But I think we all know what it means. Napster says, what are you mixing with your Diet Dr. Pepper tomorrow? Well, I guess maybe you haven't listened to the show long enough. I am just a straight Diet Dr. Pepper guy. There's nothing that ever gets mixed with that. Not a drinker, my friend. I am high on football is really it. But I do need to get some more. I went to the store the other day and the only thing they had was the no sugar Pepsi, which was fine. Oop. It did the job. And if Pepsi wants to be an advertiser on the show, it more than did the job. It was the best diet drink I've ever had. But I've been trying to mix in more water because I read that diet soda can somehow make you like dehydrated, and that scared me. So I've tried to mix in more water. I'm not a nutritionist. I'm a football watcher and reporter. JW says the most sensible thing would be to start McCarthy ride or die. It would be sensible if they believed in it at all. But it's not sensible. I mean, sensible is actually the wrong word. Like, it would be theoretical to, in a world where like we're playing a video game, it would make sense to just keep seeing if he's good in a simulation world. But in a sensible world, it's like, how can you ask all these people to go with a quarterback that they clearly don't believe in? I mean, not a single word breathed in his favor at Radio Row. Not a single word breathed in his favor at the podium. I mean, and if it was sensible, that's more of like, well, common sense would be if you can't even get the coach or the top receiver to defend him, then you're probably thinking you have to go find someone else. And I also think from a sensible perspective, it's like they believe in themselves and their ability to elevate a quarterback. That we know with Jefferson and Kevin O'Connell. And I don't think either one of those two guys changed their belief in themselves because it failed this year. Pavlov's frog. That's funny. Jefferson's got to see progress or he's gone. Mac Jones by trading Addison or rebooting with CPT. Who's CPT? Kirk on a team-friendly deal. The Kirk on a team-friendly deal thing, that feels like... Here's what I think Vikings fans want out of this is they want either a scenario where the Vikings get their next quarterback and you go, oh, okay, well, it's still live with JJ then. If you get, I don't know, Mitch Trubisky or something, maybe that's too low down the, whoever it might be. I don't know. Geno Smith still is in that range to me of like, oh, okay, well, that could still happen. They want either that or something to be like, oh, okay, I could see it. And that's like Malik Willis. Some people will buy into Kyler Murray. I think if they did it and talked about it and, I don't know, you saw him run around and had fun, you could buy it. There's like either give me excitement or give me a reason to think that McCarthy could still make it work. But if you do Rodgers or you do Kirk, then it's going to feel like you are in a purgatory place where you're just floating around in the NFL and you got a team and you got helmets and you got a great stadium and you got fans, but are you really in the league? Like, are you really in the same league as Detroit or Green Bay or Chicago or Philly? Or are you kind of just, you're not even really Dallas because they have a better quarterback and they know who their quarterback is. And just a couple of years ago, they won 12 games and should have been a Super Bowl contender. You're not even really them. You're kind of like Pittsburgh with Kenny Pickett or Justin Fields or Russell Wilson, where, yeah, you get on TV sometimes and people will definitely watch you and you got good players and you're not a joke by any means, but are you really in the league? Not really. You're Atlanta kind of existing, kind of floating around out there as a team that exists in reality, but not a team that anyone's saying, if those are your quarterbacks, hey, I could really see this. Or if this thing clicks, man, watch out. You're just not saying that if those are your quarterbacks, if those are your ideas. So it feels to me like what Vikings fans want is either a reason to believe in McCarthy or a reason to be energized in some way. And there's not that many options that lead you down that path. Eric says Matthews next what ifs. It would be, next should be the Vikings what ifs. It would be a foot thick. Yeah, I did usually during the summer I do a theme week and I did a what ifs one at one point. And there was a lot to work with. I could definitely do another one. I could do it. But you know what I don't like about that discussion is that that's always the discussion. Like a what ifs, we do that every single day, like nonstop, because we don't have playoff games to break down. But yeah, you're right. I mean, there's a lot of it there. There is a lot of it there. If Josh Dobbs doesn't show up here and Nick Mullins never hurts his back, does Mullins just lose every game and you end up drafting Drake May? Maybe. Could be. But somehow that's not what happened. JW says loves the new setup. Thank you. Thank you very much. I had that as a major offseason goal to make this look a little bit more like professional streamer guy. And so we got the book and the light up thing and the Maddens up there and the helmet and the stadium and I needed to work in the flags. I know they're kind of covered by the comment section, but I love those flags. Ask Ryan Leaf if the NFL is fair. Joe says, well, that's the thing, right? It happens all the time with these quarterbacks where one thing or another just doesn't work out. And that's what you end up with. Is somebody just, it's not that they didn't have the talent. They all had the talent. That's why they were drafted. Pavlov's Frog says Mac Jones had a better PFF, I assume you mean grade, than Murray. I don't know that. I mean, this year Murray barely played. Murray played, wasn't that great for a couple of games with a pretty bad team, then hurt his foot, then got benched so they could tank. Last year, Murray was the 12th best PFF quarterback. So if they had the 12th best quarterback this year on this team, or even next year on this team, with an improvement in running game, an improvement in defense, I think the ceiling is higher there. And we all know that the talent is higher there. Mac Jones may grade higher as a passer than Kyler Murray, although Kyler can throw the ball. But Murray also brings you 500 to 600 yards rushing, which matter, and is a huge differentiator of playmaking ability. He's going to be more frustrating than Mac Jones, but it's also frustrating to see someone with no athleticism, as we went through with Kirk for so long. Nothing's perfect. Let's Be Better says, isn't Mac more of a short passing guy? At least that's the way Shanahan used him. Yeah, so I looked into this data not too long ago. Mac Jones is a pretty decent intermediate passer, which is actually more of along the lines of what Kirk was for the Vikings with KOC. Kirk did not push the ball down the field as much as Sam Darnold did. Sam Darnold did it kind of to the extreme, but Kirk did not. So if you're bringing in Mac Jones, could Mac Jones look like 2022 and 2023 Kirk? Absolutely could. Absolutely could. I think Kirk is more accurate. I think Kirk is a better quarterback than Mac, clearly. So that's the problem, right? Is Kirk had 30 touchdown seasons and Pro Bowl years and played really well at times. I don't know if that's in it with Mac for the anticipation and accuracy. Those are his strengths, though. And under the right circumstance with 18 out there, you could see it working to game manage to some wins, to quite a few wins. What's the ceiling, really? But you could definitely see that, even if he is throwing more short stuff. Oh, yeah. The more is required thing. Have I heard anyone talk about that phrase since? Well, no, they thought they were coming back to a team that was going to be in the race. And there was a lot of reason to think that from a lot of players on this team and their performances this year, but injuries really hurt. And the average depth of target for Murray, well, if you're looking at this year's stats, he barely even played. Let me look at, but Murray has not been a good deep passer. Kyler Murray in the last few years has not been a good deep passer. He has been more of an intermediate passer and actually has succeeded more even in quick game. Last year did a lot of play action, which is kind of surprising to find out. Let me look at, you got to look, when you're looking up this data, you got to look at 2024 because he just barely played. What number were we talking about? We're talking about average depth of target. Let me see. Where was Kyler Murray? Oh, so you were looking at 2024. Okay. Or no, that's 2025. You were looking at 2025. Let's look at 2024. I mean, if the guy plays barely any games. That's not really a fair assessment of how far he's throwing the ball down the field. Let me see. 7.4. So yeah, there was a lot of shorter passing. He was 33rd out of 44. So there was a lot of shorter passing with Kyler Murray too. Kyler has not had a great deep ball success in a couple years. They've used him a lot on the shorter stuff. The difference with Kyler is, one, I think is better at it. I mean, his anticipation, his accuracy when he can see and throw is really, really good. But also that athleticism matters a lot. I mean, this is someone who is the number 1 overall draft pick. So yeah, Kyler Murray would not be Sam Darnold. He would be throwing intermediate stuff, quicker stuff, and then making plays with his legs. But he was actually under center a lot. You'd be surprised how much he was under center in 2024. So they would be using rollouts and play actions and stuff. But it's not like throw it down the field bombs. But Kyler Murray's clearly had way more success throwing the football in his career than Mac Jones has. Carson Beck in the middle rounds? Nah. I don't think so. I've always been not very enthused by the 3rd to 7th round quarterback. Every once in a while, it works out okay. But not often. Usually those are Kellen Monds. So, all right. Can work my way down the list here. Oh, okay. X large to fat has 38-10 Seattle. Guitar person's going with the over for the Patriots. No, 2 top 10 draft picks is not tanking. I didn't say they'd tanked. Seattle, saying that they had a lot of draft capital. They never really tanked, but they stacked up a lot of draft capital. They had some not great years that helped them get in the top 10. But they got that's right. Some of the draft capital came from the Russell Wilson trade, which was helpful. But again, you got to be willing to move on from certain players if you're going to draft stock draft capital. Steven says, how many coaches and GMs has Sam Darnold gotten fired? Yeah, man. Well, the New York Jets were a completely lost franchise. How many of them, if they were competent, wouldn't have gotten fired is maybe the question. If they knew what they were doing. I think Kwesi was a little different, but giving up on him. KFT, you're probably gonna lose your comments being read privileges if you keep going with the hates McCarthy thing, because it just is stupid. So, I mean, you can anybody who wants to can think about JJ McCarthy. Give him a chance. And we can have that conversation. And we can go down that road and talk about what that's like and why they might not do that. But theoretically, what if they did? What would it take to succeed? All those things. We could talk about where he would need to improve to make it work. And can you improve those things and all that? But the other stuff's just lazy. And it always was with Kirk. It was like, I would come and say, I think that the money being spent versus what you're getting versus the team that you need to build to reach the Super Bowl, it's not good enough. And I'd be like, you hate Kirk. Okay, well, old phenom Slick Rick was a master of collecting picks. He was a master of collecting day 3 picks. I don't think he was a master of collecting day 1 and 2 picks, which when Dane Brugler pointed out that they haven't picked anyone in the last 3 years between 25 and 100, it's not hard to figure out why they haven't succeeded a lot. Steven says Drew Brees and Larry Fitzgerald voted into the Hall of Fame. Maybe Kirk's agent should be in the Hall of Fame. Okay, I didn't see where you were going with that. Drew Brees and Larry Fitzgerald, easiest choices ever. I just wish that they didn't have to cut it down and cut it down and cut it down and leave guys off that belong in. If they belong in, then put them in. Just make it common sense. Make it common sense. But Mike Holmgren's not in, and that doesn't make sense. And Bill Belichick's not in, and that doesn't make sense. So I don't know. The whole Hall of Fame thing is just baffling. Steven says the FanDuel question of the day should have been, what is everyone preparing for dinner and snacks on Sunday? I used to work at a grocery store, so I can't believe I made this mistake. I don't have something for myself yet. And the grocery store is closed at 10. Tomorrow it is going to be a zoo. I mean, I'm a pizza and wings forever person. When it comes to the Super Bowl, pizza and wings forever. I plan on making my own pizza and making my own wings. But now I got to go to the store the day before the Super Bowl and get wings, which is just, I mean, if you've ever worked at a grocery store, you know what I mean. It's nuts. The day before the Super Bowl, the day before Thanksgiving, the week leading up to Christmas, those were the ones that would keep you up at night when I worked at a grocery store. That was crazy. But that's what I'm going to go with. I'm going to make just in the oven pizza and probably, cook up some wings. I tried to fry wings once. Funny story since we're 3 hours into this. The first Super Bowl, this was the second Super Bowl that my wife and I ever watched together. We have been together for a very, very long time. And this goes back to when we were in college still. I had an apartment, she had a dorm room, and we were watching the Super Bowl at my very, very small apartment. So this would have been a studio on like the 5th floor of a very spooky building. And so we're watching it, and it was a studio apartment. So there's one room and then a kitchen, and that's it. And I had this idea that I was going to make chicken wings. I was like, you know what? I'm going to make them. I'm not going to put them in the oven. I am going to buy the oil, and I'm going to fill up that pan with oil, and I'm going to put the chicken wings in the burning ass oil. And it's going to be just like we went to, whatever pizza shop. It's going to be great. And I did not defrost the wings enough, and I put them in, and it just shot oil everywhere. And so for the entire first half of New Orleans Saints and Indianapolis Colts, I spent trying to contain this fire and just wipe off all this oil that had shot everywhere in this apartment that I'm renting, and I need my deposit back at the end of the year. So I finally got that under control as Sean Payton's calling for the onside kick. So I guess it would have been 09. So I've never tried that again. Since then, I have always gone with just buy the wings, put them on a sheet, put them in the oven, and we'll just do it that way. Or get the ones that are already pretty much made for you. That was a nightmare. So I am not the guy to talk too much about my snacking and stuff because I have that on my resume. But I guess you can't succeed if you don't make mistakes. Guitar Person has 37-34 Patriots for the FanDuel question of the day. That would be great. That would be a great game. 37-34. That's all. You know this. That's all I want. I just want something that keeps me, when we get to the fourth quarter, gripping onto the side of the chair, leaning forward to the TV. What's going to happen? That's all I want. Magic Man says, back to that 98-yard throw. He dropped that thing 57 yards in the air. I know. Yeah. Corey, he has the arm and accuracy you're looking for. Yep. That's the thing. Also, a phenom shout out to the civil chatters. Totally. Thank you. And I really do appreciate that. It makes it a lot easier. That's another part, Drew. You bring up a good point. The fact that Sam Darnold's not old. That's another thing. If he was Rich Gannon, it was like 35, I would have understood much more. And I know Gannon won an MVP and got the Raiders to the Super Bowl. But if he was 35, I would have understood so much more. Or if he had been a 5th round pick and he didn't have the arm, but he was just coming into the years where quarterbacks tend to be the best version of themselves. They're usually not the best version at 22 or 23. And he was just getting there. Joe says, would have signed Darnold and put all the money into the O-line. Forget about those defensive tackles. So it would have been complicated. It would have been complicated. The thing about putting all the money into the O-line is they kind of did and made, I don't want to say Will Fries is a mistake because he was fine, but he was not decidedly better than Dalton Reisner. So you have to be really savvy with that if you bring back Darnold. But I actually think the crazy and ironic thing about the last offseason was the whole deal was great. We could spend money like crazy people. The problem is that free agency is a trap. The best signings you'll ever make are Andrew Van Ginkel at like $12 million a year because no one knows how freaking awesome he is. Isaiah Rodgers, who this year finished as a top 15 PFF corner. I don't think he's a top 15 corner in the league, but a very good starting corner who had an insane game that bumped up his stats, but was still good all year. Philly game was bad, but the most of the year, Isaiah Rodgers was a starting caliber corner. They got him for almost nothing. Eric Wilson, almost nothing. You're much better off in free agency most of the time. Now, the other side of that coin is that those two defensive tackles added up to like 65 quarterback pressures, which is way more than they've had since like 2017. So that it did succeed from that perspective, from what they wanted it to do, and they overpaid. But if they had been forced into a position to only make savvy signings, I think they could have. That the tag would have made it challenging, but it wouldn't have made it impossible. It would not have, I wrote an article about this. It would not have made it impossible to work around it. It still could have been done. Brian says Mac Jones could do it if he stayed healthy. He's a gamer and could thrive in a good system. I mean, he's been to the playoffs before. I don't doubt that they can get there. I think they could get there with Mac. Super Bad McQueen. Did anyone actually watch the Jefferson interview or just read the thumbnail? He had positive things to say about JJ. I know. Justin Jefferson is never going to trash anybody. But the vibe out of all of those interviews was more or less, like, yeah, it wasn't good. And hopefully I can help him get better. And that's really it. I mean, I was kidding with the Mariah Carey meme joke. So, it's more of like, again, being facetious than being like dead serious. But if you watch all those interviews, and I watched as much as I possibly could from Radio Row, from Vikings guys, there's not one where you come away thinking, wow, there's a lot of belief there. Positive things to say, yeah, because Jefferson's never going to say anything negative. Actual, like, we really believe in this guy and we're tired of everybody going after him. No. That was not there. There was no defiance to it. Joe said, after all said and done, sign someone with an elite arm and physical tools like Willis. At least there's the upside. I thought the Aaron Rodgers comparison was strange. Tom saying he's an injury-prone Brett Favre is probably the strangest comparison, the least apt comparison to JJ McCarthy, I think, that we've had yet on the show. I mean, the minute that Brett Favre came in, it was just like, oh my gosh, look what they have. This guy is a monster, like day one. Todd says I should go in at halftime because people will be tuning out of the halftime show. People want to bring that up like they want to start something. I don't understand that. If you don't want to watch the halftime show, that's up to you. I don't know. I was watching, because I don't know much about about Bad Bunny. So I was watching his Tiny Desk concert and I turned on the closed captions because it's in Spanish. So I helped myself understand it by turning on the closed captions. It's not really my vibe, but then again, I play 80s guitar shredding and listen to Tupac. So I don't know, like my musical tastes have not stayed up to date outside of occasionally listening to, pop singers that are out. So, but if he puts on a good show, he puts on a good show. I don't know. There's no reason to I always think there's just no reason. There's so many things to be upset about in the world. There's no reason to get upset over stupid stuff that people tell you to be angry at because it gets them ratings and stuff. I don't know. Just doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, how many times have you, outside of Prince, how many times have you gone into a halftime show like, I cannot freaking wait? Who was the one pop band where the guy, played guitar a little? Who was that? That was fine. Well, the 1 year Guns N' Roses guy, Slash shows up. That was fine. I mean, it rarely changes your life. So this person is very popular and got album of the year. His resume belongs there. Let's see if it's good. And it might not be, and who knows? I don't know. Don't spend your life angry. That's my thing. Spend your life angry at the team who let go of the quarterback in the Super Bowl. Okay, I'm just kidding. You don't need to spend your life angry about football, but if you weren't passionate about it, you wouldn't be here. So you can do that. PM Nagel says, would be interesting for an alternate timeline where Rick was still the GM paired with KOC. Might have had Kirk Cousins forever at that point. I don't actually think if that happened that the overall picture would have been a lot different, except for maybe they would have tried to stay loyal to those older players, and they probably would have gotten to the same place, but the salary cap would have been worse. So they probably would have gotten to the same place in 2023, except for Kwesi got them ahead of the game with the salary cap. But then again, in 2019 to 2020, they had to move on from a lot of players too. I wonder how much different it would be. That's a great question. It's a great question because I don't know the answer to that. Right offhand, I think, I don't know how much different it would be. Homemade pizza, very good if you know what you're doing. What I do is, we got a couple of them from Costco. So I'm not a homemade pizza as in make it as in like, that kind of thing. I just get one that warms up. But if you put a little bit of extra mozzarella cheese on it, it tastes like a real pizza. This is how pathetic I am. And everything you ask me about that's not football, I'm like, I don't know. Or guitar. I know a lot about that. But anything else? Cooking? I don't know. Just get a frozen thing and throw it in there and eat it. Nutrition? Not your guy. Dan Favre is arguably the greatest franchise quarterback, other than Tarkenton, of course. Tarkenton easily number one. Hunter says, you really get the sense that the locker room not bought into JJ, not to say they hate him. That's right. That's exactly right. That no one hates JJ McCarthy. Not me, not KOC, not Jefferson, not Aaron Jones. But my job is to talk objectively about what the team is doing and what they're going to do and what they're thinking and what the numbers say and my read on the situation. KOC's job is to win freaking football games or his owners will fire him. Jefferson's job is to catch 100 footballs for 1,700 yards. And well, I can do my job just fine no matter what happens, but those two guys can't do their jobs if the quarterback can't execute. So they need a quarterback who can execute. And then all the other stuff is mostly noise, but it also matters in some way. If O'Connell feels like he can't really coach the kid to where he really gets what he's trying to convey, or that he's not going to listen sometimes and just do whatever he wants, then how is he going to really get to a point where he can be a top-notch quarterback? That's very hard to say how he would actually get there if he's not going to follow along with what KOC needs him to do. And if he can't run the whole offense, then you just can't be here. And I know people will say, well, it's too complicated. It's not. It's really not. Sam Darnold showed up and learned it and executed it and won his first 5 games and played awesome. It's really not. Yes, it is. It's the NFL. So yes, it is. It's complicated. Every NFL offense is complicated. Ben Johnson's offense is complicated. Everyone's is. Because if it wasn't, this would be college football. It'd be the UFL. It'd be base plays. And you could just out-athlete people and win. But you can't. It's the NFL. So you have to have someone who can run the whole offense. I think in 2022, when KOC first got here, that he was adding every layer he had ever thought of for his entire life, and that overcomplicated things. I don't think that was the case past that. Dr. Smug says Matt can actually shred. Looked up his YouTube. Yeah. I just wrote another song. It's like my things that I want to do in the off season are play PS2 and write some songs. Maybe I will upload it to YouTube at some point and play it for you guys. Very, very shreddy. My wife bought me a Flying V guitar for Christmas, the most shreddy of the shreddy guitars. So I had to write a shreddy song. But yeah, there is a YouTube that I have some guitar songs that I've done out there. And they're shredding. So, did we ever get a guitar stream? No, we haven't. Well, there's always something this team does that gets in the way. But I guess after this is the time I should have done it. My guitar stuff's in a completely different room, but this is the time I should bring the amp down and get the guitar and do it, because we are 3 hours into the stream. So maybe I should just get it out and, do a little shred. And someday. But anyway, finally reached the bottom of the comments. After 3 hours and 10 minutes, I am very excited about the Super Bowl, guys, and Manny and I are going to be live right after the Super Bowl. Break it all down. We will not be talking about the halftime show, so you can save your comments for that. We will be talking only about the football and nothing else, and breaking it down and talking about what happened, and then kind of setting the stage for what's next for the off season and everything else, but that'll be fun. So if there's a lot of places that'll go live right after the Super Bowl, but if you so choose, Old Purple Insider will be here for you. And if you're watching this replay and you made it this far, holy cow, answer that FanDuel question of the day. Thanks everybody for joining. Can you tell my wife's out of town? She is calling Olympic curling, and it's on Peacock. She's starting at like 4:00 in the morning or 3:00 in the morning. So I doubt any of you are going to be able to see it that are watching right now, but you can go watch it on, Peacock there, and it'll intermittently show up on like CNBC or whatever. But that's how you end up with a 3-hour live stream, my friends. All right. Thanks everybody for your time. I've got a bunch of stuff over at purpleinsider.football, huge mailbag. And if you enjoyed this, want to support the show, want to support Purple Insider, signing up for purpleinsider.football, good way to do it. So thanks again, everybody. Football, one more game to 2025 season.